people shinobi no kami here. In this fanfic Naruto trains a lot harder than the canon and strives to become the best. This story starts right after the Sasuke retrieval mission. Hope you enjoy this fanfic. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment if you want to suggest any other fanfics for me to read. Check the description for credits and support the creator of this story. So let us begin. Chapter 3. Kitsune, Neko and Rapper. It was a quiet day in the village of Konoha as the sun began to set. Tsunade looked out over the buildings from her office in the Hokage Tower as she quietly sipped some sake. It was one of the rare moments where she had actually finished her paperwork, rather than just shove a bit off to the side so she could drink herself into a stupor. As she looked out of the window she couldn't help but wonder how Naruto was doing. Last she had heard from Jiraiya via toad summoning was about a month ago and simply stated he was doing well and still alive. It had been about a year since she had been convinced by Jiraiya that her son, brother, grandson figure needed to learn about the harsh realities of war and gain real-life experience. It made her reluctantly give Naruto a mission that she had originally been going to throw away. She hoped he was okay. If he had been hurt or killed in Kiri she would never forgive herself for allowing Jiraiya to convince her to send the blonde there. Of course if she found out that happened she would give Jiraiya a reason to regret convincing her to send Naruto as well. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. The door opened to reveal Shizune walking in with a scroll. She walked over and put it on the desk for Tsunade. It's a message from Kurigakure, Shizune said without preamble. The young woman did not know why they had sent a message out to Konoha since they were embroiled in a civil war right now, but she assumed it was a call for help. Tsunade had not told anyone that she had actually sent help to them earlier when they had sent their first request. Everyone had assumed that she had simply tossed the mission because of their policy involving foreign affairs. Tsunade snatched the scroll from the desk as soon as those words left her assistant's mouth and unrolled it. Thank you Shizune, Tsunade said as she began to read. Shizune, while curious, decided not to ask as she bowed and left, closing the door behind her with a resounding click. Tsunade continued to read as the sun went down. By the time she was finished she leaned back against her chair with a shocked expression. She had just received a message from the new Mizukage Mei Terumi. Apparently the war was over and Mei claimed that it was over because of Naruto. Of course given what she was reading. That little brat, Tsunade said with a smile as she turned back to look out at the village. It looks like I'm going to have to call a council meeting soon. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Is this information accurate? Yes Danzo-sama, said a kneeling figure. Both reports from our spies in Kiri and word going through the ranks of its shinobi have confirmed this. Danzo Shimura frowned as he tried to think about what to do with this information. Danzo had always been a very shrewd and intelligent man, having once even been a candidate for Hokage because of his talents. Though he had been beaten by Hiraishin Ch for the position, Danzo had always been a player in the background, helping manipulate things along so that the village of Konoha remained safe from its enemies. His root program was one such thing, having been originally created by the Nadaime Hokage to undertake missions from the shadows and train shinobi at a young age to be tools. Danzo was a man who would use any tactic no matter how underhanded if it meant he would be able to protect his home, taking missions that Tsunade and the other Hokage would have thrown away. Of course he refused to remain in the shadows forever. He had already hatched a plan to become the next Hokage. There were just a few problems that he needed to take care of first. One of them was Tsunade. The woman, while powerful, did not understand that to keep Konoha strong, they needed to be more aggressive in their approach to foreign affairs. Another problem was the information he just received. Apparently Tsunade had done something he would not have expected her capable of and sent one of their shinobi to aid in the bloodline civil war in Kiri. That shinobi was none other than Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and son of the Yondaime. Danzo of course knew of the boy's heritage. It had been a simple matter to find the information by having one of his roots steal the blood test on the boy, which had merely helped confirm his suspicions. It made sense in a way. Minato had always been one of the more noble people he had known, even when at war. It would make sense that he would not use anyone other than his own son for the sealing. He was definitely a man that Danzo had respect for, even if he did not agree with his soft policies. The problem that Danzo now had was information that Naruto had been the one responsible for granting the Kiri bloodline clan's victory, While that in itself was not quite a problem, the fact that the boy had apparently been able to recreate the Hiraishin was. Danzo had spent a long time plotting and planning for the day when the roots of Konoha could rule. This boy could be a great hindrance to his plans with the power he was gaining. Of course he could be a great asset as well. Danzo thought to himself as he tried to come up with a way to get the blonde under his thumb. If he could somehow get the boy under his control, it would make Danzo's plans that much easier to accomplish. He would bide his time. The boy was to come back in 2 years, and in the time Danzo would start to make his move. The one-eyed man looked over at his subordinate still in a kneeling position. I want the boy's progress monitored and I want to be sent weekly reports. Get it done. Hi Danzo-sama. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Halt. Naruto and Jiraiya stopped as one of the Volt shinobi stepped in front of them. Foreign ninja are not allowed in without a passport. Jiraiya stuck a hand in his vest and pulled out 2 small red books. We've got our passports right here. As the man looked over the passports, Naruto studied the Volt officer's outfit. Volt was Kumo's version of the Anbu that Konoha was so famous for. They were typically assigned into 3 branches of the military: assassination, combat and warfare, C and W, and the last one torture and interrogation, I and T, much like the Anbu of Konoha. Their attire was also very similar to the Anbu, with the difference being in the colors of their vest, which was white rather than black. The Volt officer nodded. Very well, these look to be in order. Try not to cause any trouble and enjoy your stay here in Kumo. Jiraiya nodded and the 2 of them passed through the gates and made their way into the village. Naruto used the time they were walking to look around and study Kumo's layout. Like all of the hidden villages, Kumo had not strayed far from the original design that all of the great shinobi nations possess, which were created during the founding of the hidden villages during the First Great War. However, unlike Konoha, Kumo had not demilitarized themselves like many of the others had after the Third War. This was evidenced as Naruto looked around at most of the people who were milling about. It was easy to tell that aside from the children, nearly 75% of Kumo's population were ninja from the way they walked, their walks being far more graceful than civilians. It was also the only place where Naruto had seen people with such dark skin. Kumo had a large history of attempting to seek an edge over other hidden villages. During the Second and First Shinobi Wars, Kumo had attempted kidnapping several people who possessed special abilities. Naruto knew that after the Third War, Hinata had an attempted kidnapping on her, which resulted in the death of Hisashi Hyuga, the clan head's brother. Fortunately, after that debacle, the Third Raikage had lost much of his power as people became dissatisfied with his rule. This led to the Fourth Raikage, taking the man's place. He did not know much about the Raikage, except that he apparently had no interest in bloodlines and respected strength. At least that was what he heard from Jiraiya's spy network. They made their way into a large stone tower, which was situated in the middle of the village. Naruto could easily recognize it as the Raikage Tower from its similar appearance to the Hokage Tower in Konoha, except it was made of stone and concrete. Walking inside, Naruto followed Jiraiya to the top floor where the man stopped in front of a desk. The woman who was sitting at the desk looked up at the white-haired Sennin. Can I help you? She asked. Jiraiya grinned. Yes, I believe we have an appointment with the Raikage. Name. Jiraiya. The woman looked through her notebook as she searched for the name, eventually finding it. Nodding to him, she went over to the door and knocked on it. Raikage-sama, Jiraiya is here. Send him in. The woman opened the door as Jiraiya and Naruto walked in, though not before the toad Sennin tossed the young woman a wink, which said woman ignored as she went back to her desk. Naruto took a look around the room and noticed it was pretty bland. There was not much around that really caught his interest aside from the few posters with weights on them. Ah. Jiraiya-sama, I have been expecting you. Naruto turned his attention to see a rather large man getting up from behind the desk with what looked like a dumbbell in his hand, which was promptly dropped, causing several cracks to appear in the stone floor. It was a very large, muscular man with slicked back white hair and a small mustache. He was wearing his cage hat and robe without a shirt underneath, allowing others to see his Hulk-like physique. Each wrist had a gold bracelet with protrusions sticking out of them. It was easy for Naruto to tell that the man was a taijutsu specialist, one who most likely used his large frame to smash up and overpower his enemies. And this is Naruto. Naruto blinked as he turned his attention to the conversation that had apparently been taking place. He looked at the Raikage with unflinching blue eyes as the man studied him. For just a moment the Raikage could have sworn it was another spiky-haired blonde who was looking at him with those same eyes. There had only ever been one man who had the look Naruto had. The resemblance is uncanny as well. I wonder if, he shook the thoughts away. After a few moments a grinned, "It's nice to meet you, kid." The Raikage stuck out his hand which Naruto took without hesitation. Naruto soon found out that the man had a very firm grip. Deciding he was not one to be outdone, Naruto used his own strength which he had taken to enhancing along with his speed. He squeezed the Raikage's hand hard enough to let the man know he also had a great deal of physical prowess even if it did not show. "A pleasure to meet you as well, Raikage Dono," Naruto said with a feral grin. Haha, the Raikage laughed as he felt the kid's grip, which was far stronger than he had expected it to be. "I like you, kid, you've got a firm grip. That shows you're strong." Naruto grinned, "I've always been told I have more bronze than brains, besides who needs to think when you can just smash enemy shinobi right through a wall. Action and power are what shinobi respect the most." The Raikage chuckled as he went behind his desk and pulled out a small box. "You know what, you're exactly right. I like you and because of that I'm going to give you these." He held out a box of protein bars. Naruto blinked as he looked at the box of protein bars unsure of what to do. He looked up at the Raikage to see the man looking expectantly and realized this was most likely the man's way of showing respect. "Thank you, Raikage Dono," Naruto replied as he took the box. "These will help increase my physical performance and training greatly." "Ha. It's no problem, kid," the Raikage said before turning to Jiraiya. "I have a hotel for the two of you already prepared." He handed Jiraiya a letter with directions to the hotel. Jiraiya nodded in thanks before turning to Naruto and handing him the directions. "I have some business to discuss with Raikage Dono. I want you to go to the hotel. You can explore for a while if you want, but don't cause any trouble, okay?" Naruto sighed. "Who do you take me for, Ero-sensei? If anyone's going to get in trouble it will be you when you decide to go peeping into the hot springs." "Stupid Gaki." Jiraiya mumbled. Naruto looked over at the Raikage. "I don't want to be too much trouble, but I was wondering if there were any training grounds you would be willing to let me use." The Raikage thought it over. "Yes, I know of a few you could use. You can use the ones on the east side of the village. Not many people go to those ones so they should be open." Naruto nodded his head and left. As soon as the blonde was gone the atmosphere shifted as the two left in the room took on a more serious expression. "So what do you know about Akatsuki?" asked Jiraiya. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Yugito swore to herself as she made her way to the training ground where she had been told the person she had been assigned to watch most likely was. She could not understand why she was the one doing this. There were other people who could do just as well with such an assignment. She should be undertaking more dangerous tasks than this. Things like assassinations and defeating powerful ninja. She was the Nibi Jinchuriki for Kami's sake. Yet the Raikage had been rather adamant that she be the one to watch over this boy, who was apparently very important, though the Raikage refused to mention why. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX flashback. "You can't be serious, Raikage-sama." Yugito said in disbelief. "You want me to babysit some brat from another village? Anyone could easily do such a task. Why not assign it to Team Samui? Hell, even just one of them should be more than adequate for this mission." The Raikage frowned. He knew the reason Yugito did not want to be stuck on such a mission. Unlike his brother Killer Bee, the young blonde woman was not nearly as respected. While a few of the civilians of Kumo hailed her as a hero, they still tended to remain weary of her, often keeping away for the most part. Add on that many of the shinobi resented her for her ability and Jinchuriki status, as well as the fact that some of the members on the council disliked her and could see why she wanted to prove herself. Every day Yugito tried as hard as she could to move out of Bee's shadow and become respected by her ninja peers and the people of this village. "Yugito, this is quite possibly one of the most important missions I will ever assign you or anyone else," the Raikage said in a serious voice. This seemed to catch the young woman by surprise for a moment, before her face went back to a small scowl. "What's so special about this kid anyway?" she asked. The Raikage laughed. "There is quite a bit that is special about him. If you complete this mission I will share it with you." Flashback end. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Not only had the Raikage been extremely vague on what made this boy so important, he also would not let anyone else but her take it. Finally she reached the training ground and found herself with a front row seat to an impressive sight. The person she had been assigned to watch was indeed there, however he was doing an exercise that the young woman was sure would even make the Raikage and his brother think twice about trying. The man, a young blonde, was currently balancing on a kunai with one finger as he did several one-armed push-ups. Sticking to his body were several decently sized rocks that blonde was no doubt using chakra to keep in place. Balanced on his feet were two large 4-foot boulders, one for each foot. He was currently blindfolded with Hiraishin over his eyes, while several Bushins of some kind were standing around him in a circle. The boy was only wearing a pair of pants as he worked, allowing Yugito to see a physique that, while not large like A's or Kurabi's, was extremely well defined. It was lithe, firm, and reminded her of a panther or some kind of powerful predator, no doubt his body designed for a combination of intense speed and strength. She could see the ripple of his muscles every time the young man would move. Watching him caused an unusual heat to rise to her cheeks. He's quite an impressive specimen, isn't he, kitten? Nibby. The one and only kitten, was the answer she received through her mind. Back to the topic, that young Tom is quite an impressive and handsome young man, don't you think? Well, you should go talk to him, then once you two are acquainted take him to your room and, Nibby. Yugito said as a blush began to spread across her cheeks. Oh come on kitten, don't be such a sex Nazi. Nibby said, go out talk to the man and then ride him until you doctor, I can't believe you. Yugito commented incredulously, though there was a large blush staining her cheeks and a small amount of blood trickling down her nose before she wiped it away. All you think about is sex, why can't you ever just give it a rest? Because you need a man in your life kitten, you turn down men left and right. It's getting rather difficult to watch, besides just look at those muscles. Yugito immediately tuned the Nibby's perverted ranting out, though she could not keep the blush from her face. She looked back over to the young man who had switched arms. She couldn't deny that he was handsome, ridiculously so in fact. But she couldn't get herself involved with anyone, aside from the fact that she needed to work twice as hard as other ninja to get any respect. She was also a Jinchuriki. The few men who had taken an interest in her were not into her because they liked her, but because they wanted her body and to claim they had sex with Kumo's famed Jinchuriki. Bragging rights was all she was. You know that's not true kitten, you just haven't found anyone yet. Yugito sighed but gave a mental nod, not wanting to argue with her tenant at this point. Instead she turned her attention back to the young man. He was still going at his workout routine. As she watched she saw the clones that were surrounding him take out several kunai and without warning started launching them at him. She was just about to yell out in warning when her fellow blonde took out his own kunai and began deflecting the attacks, even as he continued to do push-ups. The few he couldn't block, like the ones behind him, were dodged, using the boulders on his feet as a counterbalance to each other as he leaned his body from one side to the other as he dodged the kunai. In all her years Yugito had never seen anyone who had such a ridiculously dangerous training regime. She watched him for what seemed like hours but in truth was only about 30 minutes as the man continued training. When it was done the clones dispelled and the man kicked the boulders off him and the rocks on his body dropped. Yugito watched as the man flipped himself off of the kunai, landing on his feet as he took off his Hiraishin from around his eyes. Yugito assuming that he was going to go home, and turned around to leave. Only for a hand landed on her shoulder and a voice to whisper in her ear. And just where do you think you're going, Yugito yelped as she spun around and saw the blonde looking at her with an amused expression. Her eyes widened in surprise at how fast he had gotten to her. It hadn't even been a second since she had turned. That kind of speed was something she had never seen in anyone before. Seeing as how she wasn't going to answer, Naruto took a moment to look at the young woman. He had to hold in a whistle at how beautiful she was. She might even rival Mei. At a guess he would have to say the woman was in her mid to late 20s and carried an aura that all serious ninja posses. Her hair was blonde much like himself, however rather than his golden sun-kissed blonde hers was a pale shade closer to that of the Yamanaka clan. It was tied in a long ponytail that reached her lower back. Her Hiraishin was wrapped around her head keeping her bangs from falling into her eyes and face. She was wearing a black short-sleeve shirt with a purple piece of what looked like body armor that covered from her stomach to the middle of her breasts. She was wearing standard black shinobi pants, a violet bandana that crossed her hips and standard black shinobi sandals. Her body was the kind he was beginning to suspect were a standard when it came to strong kunoichi. It was very lithe and agile looking, with a grace that reminded him strangely enough of a cat. Yet it still held a generous amount of curves. Her legs were strong and slender, looking rather well-defined muscles yet still retaining their femininity. Her hips were not wide but neither were they narrow and also had nice definition. Attached to the back of her hips was a perfectly round and firm bottom. She had a slender and toned stomach that moved up into a set of perky and perfectly sized breasts that were around a mid-D cup. Naruto looked up at her face, which was a mixture of slightly oval and heart-shaped, with two emerald green eyes which were very feline in the way they were slightly slanted. Naruto favored her with a sly grin. So what's a beautiful woman such as yourself doing spying on little old me? Ooh, I think I'm going to like him, kitten. Yugito felt her face heat up at that comment as she tried to think of something to say. I wasn't spying, I was passing through and well, you see Naruto laughed as the woman literally tripped over herself to explain what she was doing here. Naruto already guessed the Raikage had sent her to watch over him while Ero-sensei spoke with the man. No doubt to make sure he not only stayed out of trouble but also to see his skills, something that most hidden villages usually do when a foreign shinobi is present. Yugito's blush instantly became a scowl. What's so funny? Naruto chuckled as he waved a hand in front of his face as if toward the woman off. Sorry, it's just that I've never seen a kunoichi get so flustered. Or at least not a serious kunoichi like you obviously are. Yugito blinked, unsure whether she had just been given a compliment or an insult. Are you insulting me? Not at all, Naruto replied. I was just teasing you a little, that's all. Though I would still like to know why you were spying on me. Yugito was instantly cowed. Sorry, I was just passing through to the training field I usually use when I heard you practicing. I guess I just got caught up in watching you. Yugito's eyes widened as she realized how her words could be taken. I mean, I was watching you train. No, I mean watching your training regime. Naruto grinned at the hole she had just dug herself in, not being able to pass up such a glorious opportunity. He walked up until he was right next to her. So you got caught up watching me, I take it you like what you see then. Kitten, this one is perfect. Take him now and ride him till you howl at the mo. God damn it, Nibi, shut up. Yugito blushed as she tried to speak but could not come up with anything. That blushing soon increased as Nibi began sending images of a nude Naruto and her in various sexual positions. She looked over at the blonde only to blush more as she realized not only how close he was but that his body looked even better up close. Unable to stop herself, Yugito's eyes wandered up and down the blonde monster's well-toned physique. She stopped when she got to his face and noticed the knowing grin he was giving her. She looked away as another blush stained her cheeks. You're a lot bolder than most, Naruto said with a foxy grin. We don't even know each other's names yet and you're already stripping me with your eyes. I wasn't. Yugito tried to deny it, yet the fact that her face was beet red took any credence she may have had away. Not knowing what else to do, she let her anger get the better of her and with a small huff began walking away. Seeing her leave, Naruto ran to catch up with her, placing a hand on her shoulder to get her to stop. Hey look, I'm sorry. Naruto apologized. I didn't mean to tease you so much. Naruto blinked as he paused and thought. Well, I did, but I didn't mean to make you mad. Yugito looked at him as she used the enhanced senses Nibi gave her to try and detect a lie. To her surprise, she found none and that his apology was completely genuine. She decided to offer him a small smile. It's okay, I guess. I supposed I deserved it for intruding on your training. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Not at all. I'm a foreign ninja, so it's only natural you would be curious about how I train. That reminds me, Yugito said, what was the training regime you just did? I don't think I've ever seen someone do something so insane before. Naruto gave a sheepish grin as he rubbed the back of his neck. Actually, it's a training exercise I set up for myself. Yugito raised an eyebrow as he continued. It's designed to make me split my attention on numerous exercises. The rocks sticking to my body are a more difficult version of the leaf sticking exercise that the academy in Konoha has. Balancing myself on a kunai increases the difficulty in chakra control as well. The boulders are used as weights and balancers to keep me in balance, especially when my clones begin to toss kunai into the mix. I use push-ups to increase the physical difficulty of the exercise and the blindfold is to increase my senses other than sight. This also helps with my spatial awareness. Yugito listened to Naruto's explanation and found herself greatly impressed with what was obviously a well-thought-out workout. It was kind of like an all-in-one extreme training routine. It would allow someone to get the maximum effect out of their exercise while also being something one could do on the road if so desired. So anyways, Naruto said, snapping Yugito out of her thoughts. I would like to make up for my teasing you. You really don't have to. Yugito started only to be interrupted by the young blonde. I know, but I want to, Naruto said as he gave her a charming smile, so I would like to make it up to you, Ms. It's Yugito, she told him with a light blush spreading across her cheeks. Yugito, huh? That's a beautiful name, Naruto said with a smile, causing the young woman to blush again. Are you doing anything tomorrow? Yugito tilted her head as she looked thoughtful before shaking her head. No, I don't have anything particular that I'm doing tomorrow. Her job was to watch him, so she would technically not be doing anything. Why do you ask? Well, I was wondering if you would allow me to take you out to dinner tomorrow, say around 7 o'clock. XXXXXXXXXXXXX for 18th time in the last hour. Yugito began to smooth out her dress as she continued to pace the room to her apartment. She could not deny that she was nervous. Despite being extremely confident in her abilities as a kunoichi, she had a hard time being confident in her abilities as a woman. Not because of any problems she had with her looks. Yugito was well aware that many people in Kumo thought she was beautiful. Her problem stemmed from the fact that she had never really focused on being a woman. Her duties as a ninja had always kept her occupied enough that even if people asked her, she would never be able to go out on a dates and the like. The few times she had been out, it was always with the small circle of friends she had, namely Killer Bee's students. You worry too much, kitten. Yugito stopped smoothing out her dress as she addressed her tenant. I've never done this before, Nibi. What happens if I do something wrong and screw this up? Yugito heard Nibi giggle in her mind. What's this? Is Yugito-chan worried about making a good impression on her date? Yugito face flushed red. That's not it at all. I just wanted to make sure that I leave a good impression on him so that it doesn't reflect badly on Kumo. You know, I'm not buying that ridiculous excuse. Yugito was about to reply when she was snapped out of her conversation by the doorbell ringing. She walked over to the door knowing that it was most likely Naruto. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed out her dress one more time. Opening the door, she came out to greet Naruto, only to find all of her breath leaving her. Naruto was not in the shinobi clothing she had seen him in today or yesterday. Instead, he was dressed in a set of well-maintained civilian clothes. He was wearing a pair of dark brown dress shoes which were polished to a shine. For pants, he had on a pair of black slacks with creases on the sides. His shirt was a black short-sleeve collared shirt with dark orange stripes running down the side of the sleeves. Yugito could see that the shirt seemed strained in certain places, mainly his pectorals and biceps, showing that while he was not overly large, he still had strong muscles. Seeing the young woman stare, Naruto grinned. So you like what you see, Yugito-chan? For several moments Yugito blinked as she tried to reboot her mental functions and decipher what Naruto said. When she did, her face began turning bright red. As she began to sputter and make excuses about why she was staring, Naruto took the time to look her over. When she was wearing her shinobi clothing, Naruto could easily tell Yugito was a beautiful woman, but with a dress on she looked absolutely stunning. Yugito was wearing a dark purple strapless dress that seemed to hug the contours of her body, showing off the luscious curves in ways her ninja clothing couldn't. The dress ended just above the knees and started just a little below the upper part of her chest, allowing Naruto a nice view of her cleavage, which seemed to be pushed up by the dress, making them even perkier than they already were. She had let her hair out of the ponytail, allowing Naruto to see it in all its glory as it hung down her back freely. It also looked like she had used some kind of special shampoo or something because it had a brilliant shine to it and looked extremely soft. Naruto also noticed that she had just a small touch of makeup on. Her lips were a light red from lipstick and she had a small amount of purple eyeline which brought out the beautiful and exotic look of her eyes. All in all, she was beautiful. Naruto breathed, unaware that he had spoken out loud. Yugito felt heat rise to her face at the odd tone in Naruto's voice. She put her head down so he would not see how red her cheeks were getting. Do you really think so? She asked in a low voice. Naruto blinked as he realized that he must have spoken his thoughts. He reached out with his left hand and put his thumb and forefinger under her chin, raising it up so she could see his smile. I have rarely met anyone who could match how beautiful you look right now. Yugito felt herself actually becoming somewhat faint from the compliment. No one had ever said something like that to her and actually meant it. The few who had, she was easily able to smell the lust coming off them. She willed herself not to pass out and took several deep breaths as she steadied her heart rate, which had been beating far faster than she had ever felt it even after her toughest training routine. Once she steadied herself, Yugito offered him a dazzling smile, which literally seemed to light up her face. Thank you. Naruto grinned as he stuck out his arm. Shall we? Smiling just a little wider, Yugito wrapped her own arms around his after she closed and locked the door to her apartment. The two walked along the streets making small conversation as Yugito told Naruto the directions to her favorite sushi bar, which was where he had decided to take her to. As they walked, Naruto noticed the odd looks Yugito was getting from some of the populace. No doubt they were surprised to see her not only with a man but in a dress of all things. It was easy for Naruto to see that the young woman was not one for dressing up. In fact, it amused him that he could still see the shopping tag on her dress, meaning either she never wore it and so forgot to take it off, or she had just bought it recently and didn't even see it. He figured it was the latter. Naruto also noticed that he seemed to be getting many glares from the males of the village. It was rather easy to see they were jealous. In the one day he had known her, it was plain to Naruto that Yugito was not really the kind of person who would go out on dates and whatnot. In fact, given how nervous she seemed, chances were good that this was her first date ever. Given how attractive the blonde woman was, he knew that at least some of the men here had probably asked her out, most likely to be turned down the moment the request for a date left their mouths. Then along comes this new guy, a foreigner no less, and in less than a day gets a date with one of the most desirable women in Kumo. It was rather easy to see why they were jealous of him. Not that he cared. They arrived at the sushi bar and made their way inside, seating themselves at 2 seats at the bar. The way Yugito moved to the seat gave Naruto a hunch that it was reserved for her, much like his own seat at the Ichiraku ramen. The thought of the ramen stand and the two people who were like family to him brought a smile to his face. Oi, Kenshi-san, can I have the usual please? Naruto watched as an old man came out of the back, wiping his hands off with a rag. The man had the same air about him that old man Teuchi had. Naruto figured it must be a chef thing. Wow, Yugito-chan, look at you all dressed up, Kenshi said with a smile as he looked between her and Naruto. I take it you're actually on a date, nay? About time if you ask me. Kenshi. Yugito said with a small whine as her face began to heat up. Kenshi just laughed. So one of the usual, eh? And what can I get for your date? He asked, turning to Naruto. Naruto smiled. I'll have the same thing she's having. Kenshi actually looked surprised before shrugging. You must have quite the appetite if you're gonna eat that, they'll be right up. With that said, Kenshi went into the back room to get supplies to make the food. While the food was being prepared, Naruto and Yugito engaged in some conversation, telling each other about their experience as ninja. For the most part, they left out anything that could be considered delicate information, such as some of the classified missions they had gone on. Yugito normally just told her fellow blonde shinobi about the different places she visited in her time as a genin under Killer Bee's tutelage, making sure to leave out her Jinchuriki status as Naruto was a foreigner. As for Naruto himself, he regaled her in tales of his accomplishments when his team had just started, telling her about his first C-rank mission where they had taken on Zabuza Momoichi and his mission to protect Koyuki Kazuhana. Yugito had to admit she was impressed that a mere team of genin had accomplished missions of that caliber, though he did have Kakashi Hatake as his sensei, so it was not too much to think such feats were possible. A few minutes after the conversation began to die down, the food arrived. Naruto was shocked to see that it was 10 servings of each dish of sushi they served here. Naruto had never seen so much sushi in his entire life. Wow, when you said I better have an appetite, you really meant it. Kenshi laughed as he went into the back of the store again. Yugito looked at Naruto with a smirk as he stared at the incredible amounts of sushi. If you can't eat it all, I'd be more than happy to take it off your hands. Naruto looked over at Yugito and saw the challenging look in her eyes. He gave her his patented foxy grin. Not a chance. This will all be gone long before you can even think of sinking your paws into it. Naruto stated in a confident tone. Yugito gave him a challenging grin. Wanna make a bet? XXXXXXXXXXXXXX Jiraiya sighed as he entered the hotel room he was sharing with Naruto. It had taken a lot of effort and negotiation on his part, but he had finally convinced the Raikage to allow Killer Bee to help Naruto train in using his Biju's chakra. He had been forced to not only give up all the information he had on Akatsuki, but he was also forced to send Tsunade a message asking for 4 jutsu from each element to give to Kumo as payment. It had been a hassle to get Tsunade to give them up and had taken longer than he had expected because of that. Still, the Toad Sennin felt it was worth the effort. He had received information that Akatsuki would begin to make their moves sometime within the next year. His apprentice, while strong, would not last in a fight with 2 S-class ninja without some kind of trump card. In other words, his student needed to learn to harness the Kyuubi's chakra as best he could within the next year. Moving into the bedroom, Jiraiya frowned when he noticed his apprentice was not there. Figuring that he was just out practicing since the white-haired man had not received a message via Toad summons nor felt any spike in Naruto's chakra, the man decided to get some rest. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX Yugito patted Naruto on the cheek as she gave him a condescending smile. There, you should have known I would win. Really now, Naruto, that look doesn't suit you. Naruto just continued to pout. He couldn't believe he had lost in an eating contest. The only person who had ever been able to out-eat him in anything was Choji, and even then the Akamaiki heir couldn't do it with some things like ramen. He couldn't believe that this woman had not only scarfed down her entire sushi platter but managed to steal at least half of his as well. It was not fair. You cheated. Naruto sniffed with his pout still in place. Yugito guffawed. You're just upset because you lost and now owe me. At that comment, Naruto's pout disappeared and was replaced with a smile that Yugito was coming to recognize. Speaking of owing, you never told me what it is you want from me. Yugito hummed in thought as the two got up and left the restaurant, beginning to make their way to her apartment. I haven't decided yet, she said as she began to tap her chin. Naruto grinned as he closed the distance between them. I've been told I give a pretty good message. If you wanted, I could do that. Naruto started as his grin became larger. Who knows, we may even be able to make it a full-body message. Yugito stumbled as a large blush spread across her face. She looked over at Naruto and opened her mouth only to close it as she could not find anything to say. After opening and closing her mouth a few more times, she just huffed and began walking again, making Naruto chuckle as he caught up. They stayed like that for a while, just walking in comfortable silence as the two went into their own thoughts. Yugito was replaying the date over in her head as they walked. The blonde woman could not help but smile as she thought of how fun it was to actually go out with someone and be seen as a woman for once rather than a kunoichi. Throughout the entire date, Naruto had given her small subtle compliments. Whether it was on her beauty or her skills didn't matter, as each were enough to make her face heat up and her heart flutter. He was the first person to see her as a woman first and a kunoichi second. While she knew the Raikage appreciated her, she also realized that he still saw her as a kunoichi and weapon. Her few friends likewise saw her as the strong kunoichi she constantly made herself out to be. While that was in part her own fault for not really trying to be seen as anything other than a powerful ninja, it was still nice for someone to notice another side of her that did not deal with death. She was shaken from her thought when she felt something move into her hand and give it a gentle squeeze. Looking down, Yugito saw Naruto had grabbed her hand with his own. He laced their fingers together, entwining their hands. She looked up at Naruto to see a smile on his face, causing her to blush, and she looked away. She was not sure what it was about this young man, but something about him brought her a sense of comfort she had never felt before. Not even when she was with her adoptive sister Samui did she feel this comfortable. Maybe it had something to do with his eyes, she mused to herself. She had to admit that Naruto had some of the most beautiful eyes she had ever seen. A deep and startling blue that seemed to pierce into her soul. She could probably get completely lost in those eyes for hours on end. Or perhaps it was his smile. Whenever he smiled at her, she could feel her heart rate increase and blood rush to her face. It felt as if she had just run a 200-mile marathon. Yet at the same time, that smile brought her a sense of security and made her feel safe and at peace. It was a perplexing conundrum that she just couldn't get a grasp on. Thinking deep thoughts, Yugi-chan? Naruto asked. Yugito turned to face him with a small blush on her cheeks at his new nickname for her. Just thinking about things, she finished lamely. Oh. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at her. What kind of things? Well, she wasn't sure what to say. She had always been a somewhat reserved person. Even with B and her other friends, she would never admit to being embarrassed or unsure, and she would certainly never admit to being so taken in with someone after only knowing them for 2 days. Naruto looked at her with a gleam in his eyes. I hope you're thinking about me and our amazing date. Yugito blushed and Naruto smiled as he continued, perhaps thinking about how you would like to go on another one. Yugito felt her face heat up more as she looked down at the ground. You would go on another date with me. Naruto smiled as the two stopped outside her apartment, turning her around to face him as he took both her hands in his. If you would let me, I would love to take you out again. Naruto moved her hands to his lips, gently kissing each one. Yugito could not help but feel like she was on fire when she felt Naruto's lips against her skin. All of the emotions and experiences she had with Naruto were so new to her. She was unsure of how to react to him. He was so different from any of the other men who had asked her out, which was part of the reason she had agreed to his request for a date. I would like that, she said as she looked at him with a small smile and a tint of pink on her cheeks. She was so glad Nibi was keeping silent for the moment, though she had a feeling she would be paying for that later on. Naruto grinned, then how about tomorrow we go out for some breakfast? Okay, Yugito said in a low voice as she fidgeted with her keys. Maybe afterwards we could even have a spar, Naruto said as challenging gleam came to his eyes. Yugito looked up at him and grinned, I suppose we could, though I should warn you I'm not considered the second strongest ninja in Kumo for nothing. In truth she had wanted to test herself against him since she had seen his training. If he was even half as strong as she thought he was, it would be a good match. I'm sure I'll be fine, I may even surprise you, Naruto said with a smile as he leaned in and gave her a small kiss on the cheek. As he walked off to his hotel, Yugito stood at the entrance to her apartment for a good while as she held a hand to the cheek Naruto had kissed. After a while of standing there, she smiled as a small blush came to her features before she went inside. Moving into her room, she removed her clothing and threw them in the dirty hamper before going to the bathroom. After brushing her teeth and washing her face of the small amount of makeup she had on, Yugito moved to her bed, lying down on it with a content sigh. When she fell asleep, it was with a content smile on her face. Deep within the recesses of the young woman's mind, a giant two-tailed cat was grinning. She was happy for Yugito finding someone nice to be with. It was well known that the Nibi was much more in touch with the emotions and feelings of her tenant than other Biju were with their Jinchuriki, since unlike most she was not really into violence. Nibi had grown very protective of the young woman she was sealed inside of, so knowing that Yugito was happy was definitely a good thing for the giant cat. She was also happy that she now had some serious blackmail material on the young woman. While she could not use it, she could still tease the girl mercilessly. At least she picked a good man, Nibi mused, and to think he holds the Kyuubi. I wonder what Yugito will think when she finds out. It should be amusing to see. With nothing left to watch, Nibi settled down and went to sleep. Tomorrow was going to be fun, for her at least. XXXXXXXXXXXX Naruto ducked under a swipe from Yugito as he tried to sweep the woman's legs out from under her. Yugito jumped over him, twisting her body as she dodged the snap kick Naruto sent her way. She landed on the ground and immediately went in with multitude of kicks, switching from high to middle to low as she tried to catch Naruto with one of them. It didn't work as the young blonde dodged or blocked all of them, catching the last one in his hands before he spun her around and threw her. Thrusting out his hands and grabbing her legs with chakra strings, Naruto pulled her to the ground. Yugito landed on her back with a grunt. Looking up, she was forced to roll out of the way as Naruto sent a punch for her head. As she rolled, she pushed up with one hand, flipping herself back onto her feet. As soon as she got back to her feet, Naruto was right in front of her. Yugito dodged the punch sent to her face. Sidestepping the next punch, she grabbed his arm and pulled him into a kick, only for Naruto to bring up a knee as he blocked. Yugito jumped away to gain some distance and reassess her opponent. They had been going at it for about an hour now, and Yugito was constantly finding herself impressed with the young man's ability. She realized that, like her own style, his relied on speed and capitulating on weak points in one's guard. However, unlike her style, his also used his great strength to maximum efficiency. Where she would usually go with grapples and claw swipes, which were meant to be combined with Nibi's chakra, Naruto used joints, pressure points, nerves and any weak point on a person to deal as much damage as possible as quickly as possible. His defense was absolutely impeccable, and Yugito had been unable to find a way around his guard. Not only that, but whenever she tried get him into a grapple hold, he would break free with an amazing degree of flexibility. His stamina was also something to be desired. Even with Nibi sealed in her, she was starting to have problems keeping up. Deciding to try a different approach, Yugito began to run around Naruto, launching kunai at the blonde as she circled him. Naruto took out two of his own kunai and began to block and dodge the weapons, weaving through them with a minimal amount of movement. Yugito shot at him with a burst of speed, aiming a punch at Naruto's head. Tilting his head to the side, Naruto thrust an open palm at Yugito's solar plexus. He connected, but rather than flying away from the hit, Yugito grabbed his arm, keeping them together. She gave Naruto a grin, Katsu. Naruto's eyes widened just as Yugito exploded in a shower of electricity, appearing a little ways from the explosion. Yugito waited for it to end. When it did, she walked up to him to make sure he was alright. She found Naruto completely unconscious with several burns where the electricity hit him hardest. Yugito instantly felt bad about hurting him this much during a spar. She crouched down to check on him only for Naruto to disappear in a puff of smoke. Before she could even widen her eyes, Yugito felt a kunai at her neck. That was a good tactic, Naruto said from behind her. It would have worked on most other people. It didn't seem to work on you, Yugito said as she turned her head to look at him. When did you switch with a bushin? Naruto grinned at her. The moment you created and switched with your own bushin. Seeing Yugito's eyes widen in slight shock, Naruto explained further. Raiden is one of my most powerful elements. I sensed the Raiden chakra as soon as you began to channel it. It didn't take a genius to guess what you were making. I created my own bushin as soon as I realized what you were doing, then when yours came at me I karawimid with it. Yugito nodded in understanding at what was one of the more subtle tactics a shinobi could use. She herself had used kariwimi with a bushin to deceive her enemies on many occasions. Still, to be able to sense when she created her clone and plan accordingly was nothing short of impressive. She doubted even Raikage-sama had mastered his Raiden element to the point where he could sense the use of it in others. You really are good, I'm impressed, Yugito said with a smile as she took the hand Naruto had just offered her and pulled herself up. Naruto pulled her up and grinned. Why, thank you, you're pretty good yourself. Before anything more could be said, Naruto felt something land on his head. Looking up, he saw that it was one of the messenger toads he and Jiraiya used. Yo, Jiraiya wants you to head back to the hotel, it said before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. He didn't really want to leave right now. He was having far too much fun, but he supposed the old pervert had some kind of reason for wanting him there. He turned to Yugito. It looks like I have to head over to see what Ero-sensei wants from me. Yugito giggled at Naruto's nickname for his sensei. That's fine, I should probably report to the Raikage anyway. I had fun sparring with you, we should do it again sometime. Of course, Naruto said with a smile, but only if you let me take you out to dinner again. Yugito blushed. That's fine, she said, having enjoyed going out with him last time she certainly would not mind having him take her out again. I had fun going out with you last night, so. Naruto gave her a grin. I'm glad, if possible perhaps we could go out again tonight, say same time. Yugito nodded. Tonight sounds good. Alright then, I guess I'll see you later, Naruto said as he began to walk, tossing a small wave over his shoulder. Sue, are you regretting this assignment now, kitten? Yugito flushed red. Well, you seem to be getting quite close to that young man. Nibby's voice leaked amusement. Not that I could blame you. If I had the choice I would have been riding him hard the moment Nibby. Yugito yelled in her mind, trying to get her perverted tenant to shut up. It didn't work, and the rest of the way to the Raikage Tower was spent trying not to blush or pass out from a nosebleed as Nibby began sending images of her and Naruto nude together. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto entered his apartment to find Jiraiya looking at him with a grin. You know, when I saw that you hadn't come to hotel last night I was worried. The man's grin turned lecherous, causing Naruto to groan as he knew what was coming. To think that my apprentice has not only stolen the heart of that hot red-headed Mizukage but also a hot blonde Kunoichi of Kumo. He began to sniff as he wiped fake tears from his eyes. I'm so proud. Naruto glared at the man as he sat across from him. You better pray to Kami that I don't find you spying on me when I'm with a woman, Ero-sensei, or I'll give you a Rasengan enema. Jiraiya just laughed him off. If he was willing to risk life and limb to peek on Tsunade, there was no way his apprentice could stop him, no matter how strong he got. That's a good one, Gaki. So anyway, I need you to get ready. Naruto stopped glaring at his sensei and tilted his head to the side as he looked at the man. He was tempted to ask what the man wanted him to get ready for. But he knew Jiraiya well enough to know he would just give a half-assed explanation or not tell him at all. Sighing, Naruto went to the bathroom where took a quick shower to clean the grime and dirt he had gotten from his spar with Yugito off. Finishing up, Naruto changed into his standard shinobi clothes with his cloak thrown over them. Finishing up, he walked back into the living room. Alright, I'm ready, so where do we need to be, Ero-sensei? Jiraiya grunted as he got to his feet. We have a meeting with the Raikage, come on, we don't want to be late. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Yugito stood at attention as she finished giving her report on what she had discovered about one Naruto Uzumaki so far. To say the Raikage was impressed was akin to saying that Tsunade liked to drink or Orochimaru had a small thing for boys. Meaning big understatement. He wasn't just impressed about the boy's skills in combat either. Yugito had, much to her embarrassment, been forced to tell about her date with Naruto since he had heard about it from some of the people in the village on his way here. That the young man could actually get Yugito to do something so out of character for her was impressive. He absently wondered if he could use this to form some kind of alliance between Konoha and Kumo. It would be hard given the tensions between the two nations that had risen since the Hyuga incident years ago when the Third Raikage tried to kidnap the heiress of the Hyuga clan. Still, it could work. Excellent job, Yugito, said after a moment. Tell me, what would you rate his level of skills at? Yugito thought about it for a moment as she went through the skill Naruto had shown her. I can't say for certain since I doubt I saw all of his abilities, but if I had to guess I would say about elite Jonin to low Kage level. Scratched his chin as he thought about that. In truth, he was not surprised that Naruto was around that level. His spies from Kiri had just gotten back and given him some interesting information. I see. I'm going to be giving you a new assignment just as soon as. He was interrupted by a knock on the door. Come in. The door opened and in walked Jiraiya and Naruto. As the two entered, Naruto spotted Yugito and waved to her. Yugito blushed a bit as she waved back. Of course, this interaction did not go unnoticed by Jiraiya. Ho, so this is the woman I was told you were spending time with. I must say you have fine taste, Naruto. She is quite the looker. Yugito felt a mixture of embarrassment and anger at Jiraiya's blatant stare, which she knew from previous experiencing with perverts like him that he was stripping her clothing with his eyes. She was just about to act when Naruto beat her to it, smashing his fist into Jiraiya's face and sending him into a wall. Ero-sensei, I swear to Kami, if you keep this up I'm going to shove a Rasengan so far up your ass you won't be sitting straight for a month. As Jiraiya pried himself from the wall, grumbling about disrespectful brats not letting a man get his looks in, I decided to move on. Despite how amusing this is, I believe we should move on, now, as I was telling Yugito here. He was interrupted again, this time by a crash as someone bust through his door. Have no fear, Killer Bee is here. Yo. B, the Raikage said in a dangerous voice as his eyebrow twitched. What have I told you about breaking in without knocking first? Killer Bee shrugged. Don't remember, yo. I think it was something about making a mess in your nest. Before anything else could be said, Yugito kicked Killer Bee in the back of the head. Damn it, B. How many times have I told you to stop with that stupid rapping? As Naruto watched the man known as Killer Bee shrug off Yugito's kick like it was nothing, he used the time the two spent arguing to analyze the man. B looked very similar in appearance to the Raikage, making Naruto assume that they were related, most likely brothers given their close age. On his right shoulder was a tattoo that said Tetsu Iron, and on his left cheek was a tattoo of a bull's horn. He had oval-shaped glasses and a white Hida-8 on his head. He had a white one-strap over one shoulder flak jacket, a red rope tied around his waist, white hand bands, and a white scarf around his neck. Naruto also noticed that he had 7 swords on his back, making Naruto wonder what he did with them all. B, Yugito, said as they got over the argument they were having, I am assigning you to a new mission. You are to help Naruto Uzumaki with his training. Yugito felt her eyes widen in surprise. This was not what she had expected to hear. Naruto, from what she had seen, was already fairly skilled. In fact, she was almost positive that in terms of raw ability he had more talent than her. Excuse me, Raikage-sama, but why do we need to train Naruto-kun? He already seems to be very strong. It was only after she saw the looks she was receiving that she realized what she had said. Currently both A and B were looking at her with a mixture of surprise and amusement. Jiraiya was giving perverted giggles and he had taken out a notebook that he began writing in, occasionally muttering about blonde Gaki's being a gold mine. However, it was Naruto's reaction that was causing her to blush. In a burst of speed, he appeared behind her with a large grin planted on his face and wrapped an arm around her waist as he pulled her back into his chest. So it's Naruto-kun now, eh? Naruto mused with a growing grin. I didn't realize you felt so close to me already, Yugi-chan. As Yugito felt her embarrassment reach a peak as Nibi decided to add her own comment, Kitten, I'm so proud of you. Remember to give me lots and lots of little ones with this young man. I didn't, what I meant was. Naruto made a mock hurt face, so you don't like me, Yugi-chan. He made some sniffling noises and used the Inu Koinu Metsuki no Jutsu, puppy dog eyes jutsu, on her. Yugito's eyes widened. No, of course I do, I just. She paused once again, realizing what she was saying, and felt herself becoming even more embarrassed. She literally felt her face burning, which got worse when Killer Bee walked up and gave Naruto a grin. So you're Yugito's boyfriend, eh? You must be something to get this kitty to play. Hearing Bee's rap, Yugito became irate again. As soon as Naruto let her go, she lunged at the large man. Naruto and the others watched with some amusement as Yugito proceeded to kick Killer Bee in the face, only for him to get back up a moment later as if nothing had ever happened. Now then, if you two are done, the Raikage said, I did not mean help teach Naruto-san here techniques, I want you to help him with his Biju. What? Yugito asked with wide eyes as she looked at Naruto. Did the Raikage pretty much just say that Naruto was a Jinchuriki? She looked at the others around the room. None of them seemed surprised by that statement. Not even Killer Bee, and she was sure he had not been told previously. He hadn't even met Naruto. You're a Jinchuriki? She asked as she looked at Naruto. You didn't know that, Yugito? Questioned B. He's the 9, yo. Why didn't your Biju let you in? That Nibi wouldn't tell you is such a sin. Nibi, why didn't you tell me Naruto-kun was a Jinchuriki? Well, you see, kitten. Nibi said in a nervous voice. Nibi. Wah. I'm sorry, kitten, it just slipped my mind, honest. Are you alright, Yugi-chan? Asked Naruto, watching the various emotions play across her face. There were several, ranging from surprise, confusion and anger. Are you mad that I didn't tell you? Yugito snapped out of her thoughts when she heard what Naruto said. No, of course I'm not mad at you. You're not a shinobi of this village, so I can understand why you wouldn't tell me. We've only known each other for 2 days, so it's not like I expected to know all of your secrets. Naruto smiled at her, pleased to know that she wasn't upset at him. Thank you, Yugi-chan. Yugito blushed. You're welcome. We will be talking about you not telling me something as important as this later. Yugito smiled when she heard a gulp in her mind. So if we're going to be teaching Naruto-kun to control his Biju, why am I here? Killer Bee is a much better person to teach than me, she admitted. While she could control her Biju's power completely, hers was only the 2 tails. Kurabi not only had the 8 tails but was also called the perfect vessel for a reason. Because while we live with our Biju in harmony, the Kyuubi prefers to harm many. Yugito's sweat dropped. Okay, that was bad even for you, Kurabi. Killer Bee looked somewhat depressed. I can't believe you're dissing on my rhymes, Yugito, after all I've done for you, yo. Naruto found himself sweat dropping as Yugito kicked him in the head again. XXXXXXXXXXX Naruto opened his eyes to find himself back inside his mindscape. Under Kurabi's instruction, he was coming here to try and get the Kyuubi to cooperate. It had been a long time since he had last entered his mind. In fact, he had not been here since he had learned the Kuchio's no Jutsu during the Chunin selection exams. He was pleasantly surprised to see the place looked a little better than the last time he was here. While it was still a sewer, the walls that were once chipped and cracked were now more pristine. The water that had once been knee-deep on the floor was gone. The place looked much better, though it was still a sewer. Following the red pipe, Naruto once again came upon the sight of a large cage. In the middle of the cage was a single piece of paper with the kanji for seal. As Naruto walked up to the bars, 2 large blood-red eyes with black slits running down the middle opened up. It's been a long time since you've come here, boy. The creature revealed itself as it walked up to the cage. It was a giant fox, with 9 red tails swishing around behind it. Kyuubi, Naruto said as he stared at the fox with an impassive face. The fox gave him a massive grin filled with malice. What's this? No, hello, how are you? I must admit to feeling a little hurt. Cut the crap, Naruto said with a scowl. You know why I'm here. You wish to use my chakra, the fox said as it looked at him, however, I don't really feel like giving it to you. Kyuubi gave Naruto another grin. Tell me little ninjan, why should I the greatest of the Biju give you my chakra? Naruto forced himself to remain calm. He knew Kyuubi's game and getting angry at the fox would only be playing into its hands. You know why you should lend me your chakra. We both know that if I die you die. Naruto gave the fox a small grin. Whether we like it or not we need each other to survive. Right now there are 9S class criminals after your power. If they capture me they will suck you out and seal you into a statue for whatever their purpose is that something you want? Kyuubi gave a hum of thought. Well I don't quite like the idea of being sealed into a statue. It looked at Naruto, and I must admit you have gotten stronger. What's this? Naruto asked with mock sarcasm. Did I just hear respect in the great Kyuubi no Kitsune's voice? Don't patronize me human. Kyuubi roared at Naruto causing the blonde's hair to fly out of his face. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the most powerful of the Biju. A mere mortal like you is nothing more than an ant to me. Naruto held up his hands in a pacifying gesture. Easy there fuzzy, I was just surprised that's all. Kyuubi glared at him for the fuzzy comment but seemed to let it slide for now, so how about it? You gonna work with me? Very well, Kyuubi grumbled, but do not think that this means I in any way like you. The only reason I am doing this is because I would rather not be sealed in a statue. The feeling's mutual Kyuubi, Naruto said as he disappeared. Kyuubi stared at the spot where Naruto had been for a while before grumbling as it laid down deciding to get more shut-eye. XXXXXXXXXXXXX outside the seal Yugito and Killer Bee were watching Naruto carefully to make sure that Kyuubi didn't take over. They were currently at B's home in the Valley of Clouds and Lightning, a place that was isolated enough that if Naruto went berserk they could subdue him without causing any casualties. As they watched Naruto, red chakra began to pour out of his tenketsu points, while neither would admit it they had never felt such a vile chakra before even from their own Biju. The chakra began to take shape, giving Naruto a pair of fox ears as what Killer Bee called the Biju shroud appeared. A tail soon began to form behind Naruto, as it did his features became more demonic. With his nails lengthening into claws, his whiskers marks got thicker and his eyelids became black making it look like he was wearing eyeliner. A few minutes after that a second tail began to form as Naruto grit his teeth. After a while when it seemed no more tails would form Naruto opened his eyes revealing blood-red pupils with black slits running down the middle. Killer Bee nodded. So 2 tails is your max little man, let's have you fight Yugito and see where you stand. Yugito's eye twitched at the bad rap but she ignored it as she walked over to the opposite side of Naruto. Stopping a few feet away she looked at the blonde shinobi. Are you ready? She asked as she got into her own stance. She began channeling Nibi's chakra forming a shroud much more quickly than Naruto did and moving to up to 2 tails. Naruto nodded, as ready as I'll ever be, he said in a guttural and more demonic sounding voice. Remember you have to maintain your tails, otherwise this exercise fails, yo. Shut up Kurabi. Killer Bee sighed at the fact that Yugito never seemed to appreciate his rapping. Getting over it he held his hand out and made a cutting motion. Start the fight yo, let's see a show. Naruto and Yugito ran at each other and clashed with a resounding boom. XXXXXXXXXXXX 6 months later. Naruto ducked under a claw swipe as he slid into Yugito's guard hitting her multiple times on the lower ribs and stomach before kicking her away. Yugito managed to flip herself through the air before skidding to a halt on the ground and falling to her knees. She winced as she tried to get up. That last attack had completely knocked the air from her and cracked several ribs, though she could feel Nibi healing her. She lifted her head as Naruto sat down next to her. You're getting better, Naruto stated. Yugito grunted, I still can't hit you. Naruto laughed, the warmth in his tone relaxing her. True, but that's because I'm not letting you use Nibi's chakra today like you normally do when we spar. Yugito said nothing as she got into a more comfortable position, only to moan when Naruto began to massage her back and shoulders, channeling chakra to his hands increasing the sensation. Naruto had been here for about 6 months, working on being able to better utilize Kyuubi's chakra with the help of Yugito and Killer Bee. During this time he had met the members of Team Samui which Naruto learned were students of B's. Karui, a young dark-skinned woman with red hair and yellow eyes, she wore a long black battle kimono with a modified armored sword holster. Omoi, a man with dark skin, light yellow hair and red eyes, he wore black Anbu clothing with white bandages around the ankles and sword holster like Kurui's. You could usually find him with a lollipop in his mouth. The last member of Team Samui who was also their leader was Samui Ni, Yugito's older sister. She had short blonde hair that went down to her shoulders, and she wore a revealing skirt with a shirt, and had a body comparable to that of Tsunade, since she had fair skin, blonde hair, and very large breasts. She also wore what appeared to be a sheath strapped horizontally across her lower back. They were an odd group to say the least. Omoi and Karui were always arguing with each other about one thing or another. Omoi would usually overthink things, which seemed to piss off Karui who would hit him. Samui was fairly quiet and would often talk about how much her back hurt. Apparently her breasts were so large that her frame could not support them. Naruto had decided to help her out by giving her a back message, which had seemed to endear the woman to him as she would often come by his hotel after a mission to get one. Though after Jiraiya had caught them and began crying about how his precious student had gotten two hot blonde Kumo girls, Naruto had gone to her place instead. Of course this did not sit well with Yugito and she had gotten very pissed when she saw Naruto giving the large-chested woman a back rub. Of course Yugito refused to say why it bothered her so much, but Naruto knew the reason and had easily made it up to the young blonde woman, by making her sushi. When not training with Killer Bee, most of his time he had spent with Yugito, who had shown Naruto many of her favorite spots when she wanted to be alone or at least away from some of the more ignorant shinobi who were jealous of her status or when they or the villagers stared at her with lust. Naruto had also much to the secret delight of the beautiful blonde taken her on several more dates. Naruto had become very protective of Yugito over the last 6 months as well, something Jiraiya had made a point to tease him about constantly, though he stopped when Naruto actually went through on his promise and gave him a Rasengan enema that sent him flying out of Kumo. During one of the dates he took her on, Naruto had overheard 2 low-ranking ninja talking about how they were jealous and wished they could get in the pants of the demon. Naruto had taken them outside and made an example out of them, showing what happens when someone disrespects his friends, by literally removing the appendage that made them male. After that no one had dared talk bad about Yugito in his presence, though Naruto found it odd that no one seemed to have a problem with B, yet several ninja and civilians seemed to have an issue with Yugito. Naruto had been reprimanded by after that incident, though he got the feeling that the man was actually grateful. Also it seemed that Jiraiya had also become weary of him afterwards, since Naruto had threatened the man with castration should he catch Jiraiya spying on him and Yugito. Speaking of, Naruto had sparred with the man a few times and had to admit he was extremely impressed. While not as fast as him or as varied in the ninja arts, he was definitely powerful and completely outclassed him in taijutsu. Especially when he used the Raiden no Yoroi lightning armor, which allowed the bulky rakeage speed and strength far superior to Naruto. The blonde had learned that the jutsu sped up a person's neural synapses, increasing their speed, strength and reflexes by a factor of 4. The only way the blonde could keep up with him was when Naruto used Kyuubi's chakra. Even then it was hard since he had sparred with Killer Bee many times. He could have used the Hiraishin of course, but he did not want to draw attention to himself. Naruto himself had earned the man's respect after their first spar and had been asked to have one again with him as well as an arm wrestling match. He felt Yugito start to sway and realized that if he did not stop she would fall asleep. Taking his hands off her back, Naruto used his water affinity to draw in the moisture from the air before freezing it into a wall, which he leaned against, pulling Yugito with him and wrapping his arms around her waist. Even if she had wanted to, Yugito doubted she could have resisted. Her body felt like it had been turned into a pile of warm goop by Naruto's magic hands. With a slight blush she wondered what else he could do with his hands. They stayed like that for about 15 minutes before Naruto broke the silence. Ero-sensei and I are going to be leaving tomorrow. Yugito, who had wiggled onto her side, looked up at him in surprise and sadness. So soon? She asked. I mean, you've only been here for 6 months and I thought that, well, she trailed off. How could she tell him how she felt? She could not even admit it to herself. She was broken from her thoughts when Naruto lifted her face to meet his. Unfortunately, Ero-sensei's saying it's time to move on. I've learned a lot while I was here, and even though I can't fully control the Kyuubi's chakra, the old pervert feels it's enough for now. We've spent all the time we can here. I understand, Yugito said. Her voice was far softer than normal. Naruto tightened his hold on her waist, bringing her closer to him as he put his forehead against hers. Don't think that this is the last time we will see each other, Yugito-chan, Naruto said in a warm and compassionate voice. Naruto sat up straight as he reached into his cloak and pulled out one of the oddest kunai that Yugito had ever seen. It was several inches bigger than standard kunai and had strange symbols that Yugito recognized as seals along the handle. It had a tri-pronged blade rather than one blade. What's this? She asked as Naruto handed her the kunai. That is how you will be able to see me again. Whenever you are in need of help or want someone to talk to, just throw that kunai into a wall and I will come. Seeing Yugito's confused look, he decided to elaborate. That kunai is the secret to one of the most powerful jutsu in the world and was what gave my father his nickname. It took a second to realize what he was talking about. Naruto had confidentially told her who his parents were, so she knew he was the son of Thekiroi Senku, though Naruto had a sneaking suspicion that also knew this. When she figured out what this kunai was for, her eyes widened. Hiraishin, she breathed out. She looked at the kunai in awe. This was for the technique that had won the Third Great Ninja War. The jutsu that created fear amongst Iwa and gave a man the first and only ever SS rank in the bingo books. And Naruto was giving it to her, essentially telling her that he would always be there for her. Now there are some rules that you need to follow when using this, Naruto said, getting her attention. The most important rule is that you cannot use this around others. I don't want to end up starting a war with Iwa because of this, so the less people who know the better. Also, when using it, just to limit it to when you really need me, like you are in danger. You can also use it once every 2 weeks just so we can see each other. Because of my duties I may not always be able to come. If you just use it whenever you feel like it, this will ensure that I come every time you use it. Yugito nodded as she looked at him. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Naruto ears perked as a sly grin crossed his face. There's no need to thank me, Yugi-chan. After all, being able to spend time with a woman as beautiful as you is always a pleasure. Yugito blushed. Thank you, I've always found it pleasurable to be with you as well. Her eyes widened and her face heated up as she realized how her words could be taken. I mean, I always found your company to be. Her rambling was stopped as Naruto put a finger to her lips. No need to get so flustered, I was only teasing. Yugito puffed out her cheeks as she pouted, before they both burst out laughing. When the laughter died down, Yugito did something that she probably would have never done had she thought about it. Leaning into him, she claimed his mouth with her own. Naruto, while surprised that she had actually taken the imitative, recovered admirably and kissed back. Deciding not to be outdone, he wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close. Gently snaking his tongue into her mouth, causing the young woman to let out a moan, he began to explore. He was actually surprised that she did not taste like sushi considering how much of the stuff she ate. Her mouth tasted sweet, reminding him of vanilla ice cream. He decided not to think about it and just enjoy the feeling as Yugito began to use her own tongue in their little duel. Taking her by surprise, Naruto wrapped his own tongue around hers and pulled it into his mouth, allowing her to explore. At first she only probed him tentatively. She had never actually kissed anyone before, so she was not sure what to do. With a little prodding from Naruto, however, she soon began to feel her way around with vigor. She found out that Naruto tasted a lot like ramen, much to her amusement. As she continued tasting, her fellow blonde Yugito felt as light as a feather. Her stomach was doing flip-flops and there was an intense heat that she had never felt before as she was swept away by the sensations and taste of Naruto. It was everything she had ever imagined a kiss would be. Despite being a strong and powerful kunoichi who hated being dependent on others, she still had the same desire to eventually find love, no matter how much she would try to deny it. Deciding to take this elsewhere, Naruto picked Yugito up bridal style and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Naruto and Jiraiya were at the gate about to leave. Naruto smiled as all the friends he had made while here stood in front of him, Omoi, Karui and Samui standing next to their sensei, the Hachibi Jinchuriki Killer Bee. The Raikage was standing a little off to the side with a smirk on his face as he looked over at Yugito, who was right in front of Naruto, a slight limp in her walk that the others noticed, especially Jiraiya, who was going to tease the Gaki for this later. Yugito herself had that afterglow that woman seemed to get after sex as she stood there, though there was also a slight melancholic look on her face. It was rather easy for everyone to see how much the young woman would miss Naruto. He had done more for her and spent more time with her than anyone besides A and B. So I guess this is it. Yugito asked, trying to be stoic. Naruto smiled as he cupped her left cheek, rubbing his thumb along the smooth skin. Yeah, but it won't be the last time you see me, so I wouldn't worry too much. You gonna have to come back soon, to help me make some tunes, yo. Naruto blinked as Killer Bee came up to him and started rapping again. He shook his head as he chuckled. Sorry, but I don't think I can help you rap, or improve your rap. But if you need a good fight, look me up. B grinned, that's all I need, yo. Just give me a fight and I'll do things right, fool. Shut up, B. Yugito jumped up and kicked him in the head, causing everyone to chuckle. I do hope you'll come back soon. Samui said as Omoi and Karui came up to him. I'm going to miss your messages, she rubbed her neck in emphasis. Yugito growled at her, but Naruto just laughed. Then I'll be sure to visit when I can. Wouldn't want you to get all cramped up and unable to even perform your duty as a kunoichi, would we? Omoi came up to him and did something no one would have expected. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out a sucker and handed it to Naruto. I figured you could use one for the road, he said as Naruto took it. Thanks, Naruto said as he unwrapped the sucker, putting it in his mouth. How come you give him a sucker but not me? Karui asked with her hands on her hips. She had asked Omoi for suckers on numerous occasions, but he would never give her one. Because, Omoi rubbed the back of his head, you're always so violent and loud, why can't you be quieter like our big-breasted teammate? Perhaps if you, he was cut off as Karui smashed her fist into his face, sending the man flying, asshole. Shook his head as he moved over and shook Naruto's hand. Make sure you come back to visit. I could use another spar soon, perhaps you'd even be able to compete with me in an arm wrestling match again. Naruto chuckled, of course. As soon as he let go of the Raikage's hand, Yugito came up and glomped him, nearly knocking the boy off balance as he was forced to readjust his footing. Naruto smiled as he wrapped his arms around the blonde woman, rubbing her back in a soothing manner. Hey, come on now, I told you this won't be the last time you see me. Whenever you need me, just throw my kunai. I know, Yugito said as she held him tighter. Make sure you're careful. The last thing I need is for my fiancé to go and get himself killed, she said in a small whisper. Naruto laughed as he kissed Yugito on the head. You should know I'm always careful. Yugito said, looking up with a deadpan expression, not believing that for a second. That's why you tried fighting both B and Raikage-sama at the same time, right? Naruto looked sheepish. Well, I just wanted to make sure I could fight two powerful ninja at the same time is all. You know, to get ready for when I face Akatsuki. Naruto turned his head away from her, getting nervous from the way she was staring straight through him. Come on, Gaki, you can make kissy face with your girlfriend when you come back. Jiraiya yelled, already walking away. I'm coming, Ero-sensei. Kami, can't I even say goodbye? He looked back at everyone and gave them a two-fingered salute. I'll see you guys around. He took off at a quick jog to catch up to Jiraiya. I wouldn't worry too much about that young man, Killer Bee said as he put a hand on Yugito's shoulder. He's not the type to go and kick the can. Yo. B, shut up. Yugito said as she sent another kick at his head. The Hachibi Jinchuriki chuckled as he stood up and walked off. Yugito looked back out where Naruto had been for a second before leaving as well. Omake. Yugito frowned as she walked around Kumo. She had been looking for Naruto for nearly 3 hours now. She was just about to give up when she heard something that made her freeze. People keep coming to hear our rhymes. We're the Jinchuriki 8 and 9. Yugito began to rush to the source of the noise as quick as she could, praying to Kami and whatever other deities she could think of that this was not what she feared it was. When they see us rappin', the peeps gather round. Everyone wants to hear our sound. Yugito turned around a corner and froze as her worst fears were confirmed. Killer Bee had somehow roped Naruto into rapping with him. The two were currently standing on the roof of a building. Both of them were taking turns rapping to the masses that were walking by and giving Naruto strange looks. Anger began to take over Yugito as she channeled Nibi's chakra. Naruto and Killer Bee stopped rapping as they heard the scream and saw a giant two-tailed demon cat that was growing larger by the minute. I think the kitty has really gotten mad. This seems to be bad. Naruto looked over at B. Dude, you might want to stop rapping and start running. Man, have no fear. I'm the 8 Tails Jinchuriki here. Yo. Raw. Boom. Inside his office, A watched as the giant two-tailed cat rampaged the city and shook his head. Great, now I'm gonna have to pay for damages again. At least my assistant can't complain about it being me this time. Chapter 4. Ika Ika the movie. You want me to do what? Please Tsuchikage-sama. Onato Kazuchi pleaded with the old cage, the son of that man is alive. This is our chance for revenge, at least let me take a small task force to kill him. Onato Kazuchi was a tall man standing at a height of 6 feet 4 inches with scraggly black hair and green eyes. He was wearing the standard Jonin garb of Aiwa. After Onato had graduated the academy, he had pushed himself harder than all of his peers, rising to the rank of Jonin within just a few years. Onato had been nothing more than a child during the Third Great Shinobi War when one Minato Namikaze had decimated their ninja forces. However, both his parents and older brother had been in the war and were in that battle where Minato used the Hiraishin and killed them. Because of that, Onato had grown bitter and vengeful, often complaining about how it was too bad the Flash was dead so he couldn't kill the man himself. Upon learning that Thekiroi Senku had a son who was still alive, he had immediately went to the Tsuchikage. However, the Sandaime Tsuchikage had not only refused his request to have the son that man killed, but had also told him not to go looking for trouble. The Tsuchikage, a man who went by the name Lenoki, was an old man with a triangular-shaped beard and a mustache. He had a large red nose and thick eyebrows, and the top of his head was bald, although he had a small patch of hair on the sides of his head which were pulled back into a knot. Lenoki was an extremely old man with a great deal of pride and a stubborn streak to boot. Many people in Aiwa described him as the stubborn old man. However, while he was proud and hated the Yondaime Hokage as much as the next person in Aiwa, he was also smart. He had been one of the few people to ever fight Madara and live and had not been the Tsuchikage through several wars for being stupid. We've already been over this, Lenoki grumbled irritably as he looked at Onato. We do not have the strength to deal with this man. If we send our men out to kill this Naruto Namikaze, we will be sending them to their deaths, or have you already forgotten the rumors that came from Kiri? Not only that, but he is with Jiraiya of the Sennin, who will no doubt be protecting the boy, making it even harder to kill him. What he did not tell Onato was that even if they killed the son of Minato, it would most likely end up being the catalyst that started the Fourth Great War and destroyed their village. Lenoki had been hearing rumors about a Naruto Uzumaki long before the incident in Kiri that made his heritage known. The boy was considered a hero to several countries in the elemental nations. Not only that, but the old Tsuchikage had received information that the Yondaime Reikage had come to respect the boy. If Iwagakure were to even make an attempt on the boy's life, they would have to deal not only with Konoha and Suna, but also Kiri, Kumo, Takigakure, Yukigakure and several other nations. But Tsuchikage-sama. I said enough, Lenoki said, not even deigning to look up from his paperwork. To even make an attempt would not only end in failure but also end in Iwagakure's destruction. Seriously, young ones these days. Onato stared at the Tsuchikage for a moment, squeezing his hands so hard they began to bleed as his nails dug into his palm. He made a quick bow before leaving, stomping down the hallway of the Tsuchikage's tower. He narrowed his eyes in anger at the old man's cowardice. They had to strike now, not only for revenge but to kill the boy before he got too powerful. If the Tsuchikage would not do it, then he would have to take matters into his own hands and kill this Naruto Namikaze himself. In a large cavernous room there was a large grotesque statue, with 9 eyes. That were currently closed as it held out its hands. On the fingers of those hands were 9 holographic figures who were currently having a meeting. Not much could be seen about these figures except for their general outline and eyes. You say you have gotten information about the 9 tails? Asked one figure that had spiky hair and odd gray eyes with a purple ripple pattern in them. Yes, it seems he was in Kiri. The people there have started calling him a hero, said a person who looked like a man that was eaten by a giant Venus flytrap and managed to get his head part way out. A hero, huh? Smirked one of the other figures, this one with a shark-like eyes and a large sword strapped to his back. Yes, apparently he saved the country and stopped the bloodline civil war. The plant man said. Information has come out that he destroyed an entire army with a single jutsu and fought and killed the Jinchuriki Kage Yagura afterwards. For a long moment silence reigned as the implication sunk in. When it did, the people in the room had several different reactions. The one with the ripple eyes got a somewhat troubled look while the one next to him, a female with amber-colored eyes, remained impassive. The one who looked like a shark had his eyes widened before a smirk adorned his face. One who had a pair of blood-red eyes with 3 tomo in them had widened in shock before going back to their passive look. A figure that had a hunchback remained impassive, while a figure with blonde hair that covered one eye looked surprised and partially scared. Another figure with slick-backed white hair didn't seem to care, while a figure with black eyes had no visible reaction. "This is troubling," said the figure with the ripple eyes. "That's not all," the one who looked like he had been eaten by a Venus flytrap said. "Apparently the claim is that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is the son of the Kuroi Senku and used the infamous Hiraishin to destroy the army." That caused an even larger ripple of worry to move through the entire room. Everyone knew about the man who was considered to be one of the most powerful shinobi to grace the elemental nations. If the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was the son of that man and able to use such a powerful technique, it could be trouble. "While this information is unwelcome, our plans remain unchanged," the one with the ripple eyes said at last. "We will continue gathering information on the other Jinchuriki and Biju. We will save the Kyuubi for last." The other images nodded at their apparent leader's words and phased out of existence. As they did, a lone shadow appeared on one of the fingers. "So the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is the son of that man, and to think he was able to beat my puppet. I should have realized this. He may become a problem in the future." The shadow soon disappeared as well, leaving the area to appear as if it was untouched. Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath as he stood on the bow of the ship he and Ero Sensei were on, known as the Lady Luck, enjoying the feel of the ocean breeze against his skin. He and Ero Sensei were on their way to Haru no Kuni, the place he had saved with Team 7 before he had left on his training trip. He was intrigued and curious about the reason they could be heading there, but like always his sensei would just smirk and say he had some business to take care of there. Still, he couldn't complain and was looking forward to seeing his friend Koyuki Kazuhana again. He absently wondered how she was doing with her double career as both a daimyo and actress. It would be good to see how she was doing. "Do you need something, sensei?" asked Naruto, not even bothering to turn around. Jiraiya shook his head and grinned at his student. The boy had come a long way in the last 2.5 years, going from a loudmouth braggart to a man with the calm of a seasoned shinobi. The Toad Sennin was proud to see how strong and mature his godson was becoming, though he still seemed to keep a playful attitude and penchant for pranks, as evidenced by the time Jiraiya had found himself hanging over the woman's side of a hot spring naked with the word "super pervert" written in big bold letters on his ass. Of course, he had made a comment asking Naruto how it was to sleep with that hot blonde woman Yugito, so he supposed it was sort of his fault. Walking up beside his prized pupil and godson, Jiraiya looked out over the water, sharing a comfortable silence between the two. "We'll be entering port sometime tomorrow," Jiraiya finally said as he turned to look at Naruto. Naruto nodded, having already known this. "So what will I be learning during our time here? Now that we have worked on gaining experience, your physical capabilities, elemental manipulation and trump card, I'm going to be teaching you how to better work with the toads." Naruto looked at Jiraiya as he began to explain what he meant. "I am sure you've seen some of the jutsu I can create when in conjunction with the toads, as well as specific summoning techniques that do more than just summon a toad to battle." Naruto nodded. "You mean like that Kuchio's Gamaguchi Shibari summoning jutsu, Toadmouth Bind jutsu you used when we had our run-in with Itachi and Kisame?" Jiraiya grinned. "Yep. These techniques are very powerful and something that only we can do because of our contract with the toads. As we travel to the Haru capital, I'm going to have you summon the different toads and get to know them and their abilities better. After that, we'll do some sparring with toad partners so you can get a feel for what's it's like working with toads other than Gamabunta, Gamashiki and Gamatatsu. Then we'll begin working on the specialized toad ninjutsu." Naruto grinned as he felt somewhat giddy at the prospect of learning the toad techniques. The toads who reside on Mount Myoboku were well known to possess a wide range of abilities, anything from spitting water and oil out of their mouths to utilizing weapons in combat. The toads were also one of the few species that had the ability to do ninjutsu, and the only animal Naruto knew that was capable of using hand signs. Naruto knew that Jiraiya was well known for his jutsu that mainly consisted of toad-based abilities. It was the main reason the man had earned his nickname as the Toad Sennin. The knowledge that Naruto was going to be one of only 2 other people to learn the toad-based jutsu was enough to almost make him shout out his joy from the top of ship. Almost. Naruto looked around the large capital city of Haru no Kuni with a large smile. It had been a long time since he had been here and could not help but enjoy seeing how the city had prospered. Originally known as Yuki no Kuni due to the fact that the country had always been in a never-ending winter, it had been renamed after Dodo had unwittingly activated a heating generator designed to melt the snow. Naruto chuckled to himself at how furious the man had been when that happened, as well as how the man got a Rasengan to the gut for his troubles. After that, Koyuki and the members of the original court that had been under Koyuki's father had renamed the land Haru because it was now always spring. The country had become very popular since then it seemed. Everywhere Naruto looked he saw hundreds of people going about their business. Stores and restaurants of all kinds lined the streets. Many people were looking around and taking pictures or shopping for the latest wares or technology that the place was known for. As they continued walking, Naruto noticed they were coming up on the palace that housed Koyuki. The blonde frowned as he began to wonder what Jiraiya's business was and if it had something to do with the woman he had saved. He ignored the small shiver that ran down his spine as they were granted entrance. Walking down the hall they came to a large set of double doors which a pair of butlers opened for them. Walking in, Naruto found himself staring at the beautiful form of Koyuki Kazuhana, who was currently sitting behind a desk, reading from a scroll. Naruto looked at the young woman as they made their way to her. In all honesty, she had not changed much from the beautiful woman he had first met back then. Her hair was still its long dark blue color which brought out a contrast with her light blue eyes. She was currently wearing the royal kimono of a daimyo which was thick and managed to hide the luscious curves of her body, which Naruto knew from the one time during the filming of the movie when he had been a guard and had been ordered to retire her, and she answered in her underwear was amazing. Koyuki Dono, a pleasure to see you again, Jiraiya said with what he hoped was a charming voice. Koyuki looked up from whatever she was reading. Ah, Jiraiya-san, Koyuki greeted as she stood up. I had not expected you to come here so soon. The director won't even be here for another month. Koyuki trailed off as her eyes latched onto the form of Naruto. Soon a small blush spread across the young daimyo's face as she looked at, in her opinion, was easily one of the most handsome men she had ever seen in her life. With a body that looked like it had been chiseled from stone, the young woman could see his muscles twitch with each small movement he made in the nearly skin-tight black shinobi clothing. His eyes were the most startling and beautiful blue she had ever seen, while his face had roguish good looks that combined with his wild golden blonde hair and whisker marks added a feral sex appeal. Wait, whisker marks. Koyuki nearly did a double take as she looked at the whisker marks and finally realized she knew this man. She moved around Jiraiya, completely ignoring his presence, and stopped once she stood in front of the young blonde. Naruto, she asked in a tentative voice. Naruto gave her his foxy grin. It's been a long time, Koyuki Dono, and it seems you've only gotten more beautiful in the time. I didn't think that was possible. Koyuki felt her face heating up at Naruto's words, but being an actress she was able to keep most of it under control, and you have grown into a handsome young man. Koyuki said before surprising the blonde shinobi and engulfing him in a hug, though it was not long before Naruto returned it. I missed you, Koyuki admitted while buried in his well-muscled chest. Naruto blinked in surprise before he smiled and returned her hug. I missed you too, Koyuki Haim. Koyuki pulled back from the hug but instead of letting go grabbed his arm and began dragging him out of the room. Walk with me, she said in what Naruto easily recognized as her daimyo voice and decided to comply with her command. Jiraiya looked after the two of them in surprise before a perverted grin spread across his features. I knew this Gaki would be a gold mine for my research. Naruto found himself and Koyuki walking through one of the many gardens her palace had as the two of them talked, making light conversation which mainly consisted of Koyuki asking Naruto all kinds of questions about where he had been and what he had been doing. The two eventually stopped to sit on one of the benches located throughout the garden. Wow, I suppose I should have expected you to do something like that with your luck, Koyuki said as she listened to some of Naruto's stories. Naruto smiled. So what about you? He asked, tilting his head to the side in what Koyuki thought was an adorable fashion. How have you been? Oh, I've been all right, Koyuki replied. Not much has been going on here that I would consider exciting, except maybe the new movie I'm going to be starring in, she added as an afterthought. You're not seriously considering maybe that movie, are you? Asked Naruto. I mean, it's pretty well perverted. Koyuki asked with a grin. Yeah, I know, the council has been harping about me making this movie too. But I still have a contract with my director that lasts for another 2 years and with his Princess Gale movies all finished. I see, Naruto nodded in understanding, so because of the contract you kind of have to make the movie. But couldn't you just, I don't know, null and void it? Koyuki shook her head. No, at least not anymore. If a daimyo makes any kind of contract with anyone it always needs to be upheld, otherwise people would think I would not hold up any agreement I made. Also this director is the biggest one in the industry, if I were to deny him he would be able to blacklist me and keep me from making movies. Naruto nodded as that made sense since he had a nindo that was very similar to what she just said. Contracts be they verbal or written out should always be upheld no matter what. He could also understand the blacklisting part, having been blacklisted by many of the stores in Konoha. I can understand and even respect that you're still going through with this decision, Naruto said. Thank you, it's nice to know someone understands, Koyuki replied. The rest of their time there was spent talking about how they had been doing the past 2.5 years. Naruto sighed as he looked over at the director and Jiraiya making enthusiastic motions as the set was being made, most likely speaking about the movie. Seriously, who would have guessed that the director was a pervert? He turned back to look at Koyuki who at the moment was talking to one of the maids about something, a small smile found its way to his lips. During the month he had been here he and Koyuki had been spending most of their free time together. The young blonde really enjoyed being in the presence and speaking with the beautiful daimyo. What do you mean your actor is sick? Naruto turned to look at Jiraiya who was the one shouting. Just what I said, the director replied, he came down with the flu about a week before we left. And you're just telling me this now? Asked an annoyed Toad Sennin, knowing this would seriously put his beloved movie back. It hadn't come up until now, the man replied. This is just great. Jiraiya groaned as he palmed his face. Now who are we gonna? He paused for a moment as he remembered something. Turning his head he looked over at Naruto with a large grin etched on his face. Oh no, Naruto said as he growled at Jiraiya. No way in hell am I gonna let you film me having sex. Naruto growled as he began leaking killing intent at Jiraiya, making the man pale. But I need you to do this for me please. Naruto growled at the man, he should have known his sensei would have some perverted alternative motive for coming here. But even he did not expect the man to do something like this. I'm not gonna do it. Get someone else to help you with your perverted scheme. Jiraiya gulped at his apprentice's glare. If looks could kill right now the white-haired man was sure he would have just been filleted like a fish with that glare. He knew his apprentice would not agree to this willingly, which was why he had not said anything before now. Come on. I need you to do me this one little favor. Naruto glared at his sensei. Now listen here you perverted old coot, I told you no. There's no way I can do this, besides Koyuki-chan would not want to have sex with. I don't mind. Naruto and the others turned to look at Koyuki who had started listening in on the conversation and now looked like she was about to pass out due to all the blood rushing to her head. She had never told anyone but after Naruto had saved her and her country she had developed something of a small crush on him. Sure he had been a little kid back then but he had also been the one who understood her and came to her rescue when she needed him, and it's not like he was a little kid now. Koyuki fidgeted a little as she looked at the ground. I really wouldn't mind if it was with you Naruto-kun. In fact I would. Koyuki paused and took a deep breath and plunged on. In fact, I would feel much more comfortable if I was doing those scenes with you. Naruto faltered as he felt a small crack in his willpower. He had always had a weakness when it came to women and this time was no different. I'm not sure. Please. Koyuki asked looking at him with a look that was somehow both extremely sexy and innocent at the same time. I wouldn't feel comfortable with anyone else. Naruto bit his lip. Well, he paused before sighing. Why don't we talk it over dinner and I'll come to a decision then. Koyuki looked at him with a small tint of pink staining her cheeks. You mean dinner like a date? She asked. As the young female daimyo looked at Naruto she could not help but feel as if her heart was about to burst out of her chest. Despite the time they had spent in the past month the two of them had not actually gone on a date, something Koyuki secretly wished she could do with the blonde shinobi. Another chip appeared in Naruto's reserve at seeing the young woman's hopeful face. He gave her a smile. If you would like it to be a date, I would be more than happy to take you out on one. Koyuki gave him a large smile that threatened to split her face as she grabbed his hand and dragged him out, telling him about where they were going and that they needed to get ready. Jiraiya gave a sigh of relief. I'm glad Koyuki Dono was here or there's no way Naruto would have agreed with this. He looked to where Naruto and Koyuki left and anime tears fell from his eyes. I'm so proud of him. The director looked at the white-haired senin before shaking his head and focusing his attention to getting the set built. Many people stopped to watch as Naruto walked down the street with Koyuki on his arm. Most of the females watching were wondering how Koyuki knew the hot young blonde while the men were jealous of Naruto for having the alluring and sexy daimyo and actress hanging off of his arm. Instead of asking Koyuki about how she had been like they had been doing for the past month, Naruto questioned the beautiful daimyo about some of the things she had been doing since with her job. Naruto was pleased to hear she had taken it upon herself to continue her father's legacy and was in the process of creating new and useful technology. She had also told him about how she had had the railroad rebuilt. They had fixed up and upgraded the trains to now use steam rather than coal, allowing her to cease worrying about trying to procure the expensive import from Iowa. This allowed for faster travel throughout the country, making trading and moving goods and supplies much easier. Naruto had to admit to being impressed with the young woman's handling of things since she became daimyo. The two eventually arrived at an expensive-looking restaurant where the waiter nearly stumbled over himself as he escorted Naruto and their very own daimyo Koyuki, blabbering away about how honored he was to serve them. As the two sat across from each other in a small booth, Koyuki decided to ask Naruto about himself. So what exactly has your sensei trained you in? Ero-sensei has been training me in all aspects of being a shinobi. Naruto started making Koyuki laugh at the perverted nickname he gave Jiraiya. He's been training in ninjutsu, taijutsu, fuiinjutsu, and I've also been learning strategy. Recently he's been teaching me the toad ninjutsu he's known for. Naruto told her, telling her of some of the jutsu he had been learning as well as some of his own techniques. Sounds like you've gotten really strong, Koyuki said with a tone that spoke of how impressed she was. The young daimyo then got a sly grin on her face. I also hear you've become the hero in Mizu no Kuni, which you neglected to tell me, she finished. Yeah, sorry, I just don't feel comfortable talking about the war one took part in. Naruto sighed, ran a hand through his hair as he sighed, but yes, I did help them end the bloodline wars. Though I really didn't do that much. You're far too modest. Koyuki laughed at seeing Naruto uncomfortable for being considered a hero. I heard you were able to defeat the entire army with a single jutsu. Yukigakure even has you in our bingo books. Yukigakure had been the hidden village that was created by Dodo, who used its ninja to kill his brother Setsu Kazuhana and take over as daimyo. Afterwards he had chosen the three best in the village to become his personal bodyguards. After Dodo's defeat, Koyuki had allowed the village to remain and helped fund the village so it could begin training younger generations. Naruto had heard that Koyuki had let the village remain as long as they pledged their loyalty to her. He had also found out that they were using Konoha's academy as the basis for their own. Really? Naruto asked in surprise. He had not even realized that he was in the bingo books, though he supposed it was only a matter of time before it happened. Yep. Koyuki grinned as she took a bingo book out of her dress. Do you always carry a bingo book with you? Asked Naruto with an amused smile. Usually yes, Koyuki replied as she flipped through the pages. I thought it would be a good idea to have one on hand, just in case you know. Naruto nodded in understanding as Koyuki handed him the book. Taking a look, Naruto saw that the stats were his own. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Recent title. Nadaime Kuroi Senku. Second Yellow Flash. Rank S. Physical description. Wears black shinobi clothing with a black hooded cloak, spiky blonde hair, blue eyes with 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Statistics. Ninjutsu. 10 is well known for having mastered many powerful jutsu such the Rasengan, Hiraishin, as well as several upgraded versions of the Rasengan and many elemental techniques. Rumor has it he has created several powerful jutsu that are S-class and above. Taijutsu. 9 Taijutsu said to be nearly on par with the Yondaime Reikage, who is well known for his impressive hand-to-hand combat. Genjutsu. N.A. not known to use Genjutsu. Kenjutsu. 9 Not much is known, but he is said to use a sword that was especially made for him, a Tetsu no Kuni. Kinjutsu. 10 Aside from Kage Bushin, it was rumored that he created a Kinjutsu with a classification of SS class. Fuiinjutsu. Rumor claims that he is a seal master that surpasses Jiraiya of the Sennin and is on par with the Yondaime Hokage. Elemental affinities. Futen, Raiden and Suiten. Warning. If you end up in a fight with this man, it is suggested that you run. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the information. It was a fairly accurate account of his abilities, though there were a lot of gaps in it. He was actually grateful for that, since it would mean he was still something of an unknown. This would give him a large advantage should people try to come and kill him. I had no idea I was that famous, Naruto said as he handed the book back to Koyuki. I mean, I knew this would get out eventually, but you've been famous for a while now, she told him, with a smile. After all, you were in the Princess Gale movie. Naruto laughed. That's true, I remember I went to go see it. I was surprised when I saw myself launching a Rasengan into your uncle in your movie. The waiter came up to take their orders, with Naruto ordering Keizeki Ryori, an expensive dish with a number of small dishes. Steamed, simmered and grilled, often includes raw fish, grilled fish, tempura, soup, rice and other foods. While Koyuki ordered tora fugu, blowfish, with a side order of rice and steamed vegetables. The pair sat in companionable silence as they waited for their meal to arrive, each of them having their own thoughts. Naruto looked over at Koyuki as he thought about the situation he now found himself in. It's not that he had a serious issue in sleeping with Koyuki. They had been friends after his mission to protect her, and the two had been able to send a few messages every now and then. He did like her and knew they were fairly close in spite of not seeing each other for a few years. However, Naruto did not want to have sex with her just for some porn movie and would want to be more than just the guy she had sex with for a movie, but he knew that a relationship with her would be hard. She was a daimyo and ruled an entire country. That not only took a lot of her time, but it also presented a problem if he ever wanted to marry her. A daimyo could never marry unless it was with nobility. Either another daimyo or a prince or princess was usually a requirement. And Naruto didn't think that the prince of the now defunct Uzu no Kuni, Whirlpool country, counted. Naruto stuck a small seal under the table, activating a silencing barrier so any conversation between them stayed private. Hey Koyuki-chan, Naruto started getting the young woman's attention. So, why exactly did you want me to be your The blonde cursed as he felt his face heat up. He hadn't been this embarrassed since the first time he started talking to girls outside of Konoha. Why do I want you to do the sex scene in the movie with me? Koyuki finished his question for him. The only sign Naruto could see of her being embarrassed was the small tint of pink on her cheeks. Naruto nodded and she smiled as she closed her eyes. Well, there are many reasons, I suppose. When I first agreed to star in this movie, I was afraid it would be someone random actor I would feel uncomfortable with and who would no doubt use this scene as bragging rights about how he had sex with a daimyo. So you felt that since we were friends it would be better to have me do it? Naruto asked with a small frown. Koyuki squirmed a bit as she lowered her head. Does that bother you? Naruto sighed as he stood up and sat down next to her, gently raising her head so that her eyes were looking at his. No, I understand why you feel that way. I know that I wouldn't want to do something like this with someone I was not familiar with. Of course, I doubt I would want to do it at all, Naruto said with a small chuckle. I'm not upset or bothered by it. I just have several reasons why I would be really uncomfortable with doing this. Why? Asked Koyuki. I mean, if it was any other male being asked to do this, I'm sure they would be bragging from here to Konoha. Naruto smiled. That may be true, but you see, I already have someone I plan on marrying, and the possibility of getting another once I ask her. Koyuki looked at him in shock. Two fiancés? She asked with an owlish expression. Naruto nodded and began to explain to her about the Clan Restoration Act that had been set down when Konoha was founded. Koyuki listened to Naruto with a sort of awed detachment as she thought about what he was telling her. In all honesty, it did not sound as odd to her as it may have sounded to a civilian. She had studied up on ninja villages and most of their laws, so she knew that they had things like this, especially if one of the clans that held a bloodline was about to go extinct. It was also well known that several of the male daimyos in the elemental nations had either multiple wives or concubines. She knew that Naruto had a clan because of his father as well. When word spread that Naruto was the son of the Hokage, a lot of the different royal families in various countries had actually talked about forming an with Konoha alliance through marriage. Her own council had been one of those that approved of him when he was brought up as a potential candidate for marriage. However, she did not know about the CRA, and she was sure that the others on her council did not know, or they would have brought it up. She focused all of her attention back to Naruto, who seemed to be finishing his small speech. And that's why I don't feel comfortable doing this. I don't want to have sex with you just for some movie. Koyuki twirled her hair between her fingers, so if it was for more than just the movie you would. If we were getting married I would. Naruto corrected. Had it been 2 years ago I probably would too, but now that I actually have one woman who I already know I'm marrying and another I plan on asking when I see her next, I don't want to betray their trust by having sex and then having it shown in front of every pervert in the elemental nations in a movie. Koyuki smiled as she listened to him. It seemed that Naruto was a romantic at heart even when he had to marry multiple women. So say we could get married. Koyuki stated, if we did you wouldn't mind. Naruto looked at her as he thought about it. I suppose it wouldn't be as bad then, but. Then there's no problem, she interrupted him. I'll just go to the council and tell them we're going to get married. Naruto blinked before staring at her like she had grown a second head with 4 eyes and a sharp row of fangs. It couldn't be that easy, could it? Also, aren't you making this decision a little too quickly? Well, there may be a few problems since you have to be with at least 3 other women besides me, Koyuki said. But since I am the daimyo I ultimately have the decision of who I get to wed, and since your name came up a number of times when the council spoke to me about getting married they won't make the CRA as big of a deal as they would with someone else. She looked down at the table. As for moving too fast, the council has actually been asking me to take a husband soon. I don't want to end up in some loveless marriage. And you're okay with me getting married with other women? Naruto asked incredulously. Koyuki shrugged. I understand why you may have to go through with it. I have read up on clan laws for various villages to better understand their workings, so I know that the circumstances you find yourself in are not as unusual as they would normally seem. I may not quite approve, but. She paused for a second to lean on his shoulder. I'm willing to work with it. I'll be honest, when you saved me both from Dodo and my own darkness I had wondered many times if we could somehow be together after you grew up. I hope that's not some dig on how childish I was, Naruto said with a mock pout, instinctively wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her closer. Koyuki giggled. Maybe. Naruto made a few sniffling sounds. That's cold, Koyuhime, very cold. Naruto pulled off the silencing seal and a few minutes later dinner came, the waiter blinking in surprise as he noticed the new position the two were in before setting the food down. The two became quiet as they opted to enjoy the food in silence. When they were done, Naruto and Koyuki made a little more conversation on some of the lighter subjects while waiting for the bill to come. If we're going to go through with the marriage, do you think it would be alright if we at least went on several dates first? Asked Naruto. I would at least like to get to know you a bit better in a more intimate setting before we take such a large step. Of course, Koyuki said with a smile as the bill came. I wouldn't have it any other way. She was just about to grab the bill when Naruto got to it first. I've got it, he said. But shouldn't I get that? I mean. If it's money you're worried about, don't, Naruto said with a smile. Because of my books I've currently got about 36 figures in my account. Koyuki tilted her head to the side as he stared at him quizzically. What book is that? This one, Naruto said as he channeled chakra into a seal on his wrist. Koyuki gasped, found herself staring at a book with a dark blue cover. However, that was not what had gotten her attention. What had was the title of the book. You wrote this, she breathed. Naruto ignored the tone as he nodded. Yep, I did. Why do you? Naruto stopped talking as he turned around to face Koyuki and saw that she was staring at him, with stars in her eyes. Looking at her hands, he saw she was holding the book out to him. Naruto blinked as he wondered how the book had just appeared in her hand. This book is my absolute favorite. Koyuki squealed, sounding almost like a fangirl. Do you think you could sign it for me? Sure, Naruto said as he grabbed the book and unsealed the brush he used to make seals. Channeling some chakra into the seal on the brush, he activated the ink creation seals. To Koyuki Kazuhan, one of the most beautiful and stunning woman I know, love Naruto. How does that sound to you? Naruto asked as he looked over at Koyuki only to sweat drop as hearts appeared in her eyes. That sounds perfect, she said as she grabbed the book. Naruto blinked as the book disappeared again and Koyuki leaned into his side with a dreamy sigh. I wonder if she is using seals to keep that book with her. After the meal was paid for, Naruto and Koyuki went back to the palace, entering the room with all of the people running around still trying to get the set built. Naruto spotted Jiraiya and the director over near a table discussing something. With Koyuki on his arm, he walked over to the two. Coughing to get their attention, Naruto started to speak. I've spoken with Koyuhime here and have agreed to do this. Before the two could even so much as grin, Naruto sent them a glare. But I want one thing made clear. You two officially owe both me and Koyuki-hime for doing this. I expect that payment to be returned in full as well as have several requests to make. The two reluctantly nodded their heads and Naruto gave them a grin that sent several shivers of fear down their spines. First, Naruto held up a hand with a finger pointed out. No one will get to watch while the two of us do the sex scene. Jiraiya opened his mouth to complain but Naruto beat him to it. If you don't like it you can find someone else. Jiraiya begrudgingly shut his mouth as Naruto continued. You can set up several cameras in a room but no one will get to see the results until we're done. Second, I expect you Ero-sensei to write a letter to both Mei Terumi and Yugito Ni about how you forced me to do this by blackmailing Koyuki and I. Hey now wait just a minute. Jiraiya interrupted. You can't expect me to do that, they'll kill me. First off, Mei is more likely to melt your balls off before killing you while Yugito would probably go nibby on your ass. But it shouldn't matter to you, after all you should be used to woman trying to kill you Ero-sensei. Naruto said with a smirk. After all the times you've peeped on woman and gotten the shit beat out of you, you should be practically immune to this stuff. I'm also going to proofread the letter and make sure I know what you are writing as well as watch you send it, just in case you try to do something I might not like. Jiraiya gulped knowing this was not going to end well for him, but for the sake of his movie he nodded. And the last request? Jiraiya asked. Naruto grinned as the shadows from his hair covered his eyes giving him an eerie look, making Jiraiya pale. The last request is when we get to Konoha I'm going to have you tell Tsunade why I was in your porn movie when she finds out. Jiraiya's eyes widened to epic proportions as he became as white as a sheet. The thought of going to tell Tsunade that he had convinced her grandson, son figure to star in his Ika Ika movie was quite possibly the worst out of all three requests. Telling the other girls would not be nearly as bad since they could never hope to match what his buxom teammate could do. Tsunade would no doubt string him up by his balls, beat the shit out of him, then use his manhood as a punching bag before she killed him. Images of all the pain Tsunade would no doubt inflict upon their return ran through his head and Jiraiya did the only thing he could do in this situation. He fainted. Onato grinned as he looked at the man who was helping him and the few people he brought along. People who Onato had managed to join him in this quest after hearing they were going after the son of the Kuroi Senku. You better hold up your end of the deal, Onato told the man who scowled at him. Of course I will, the man said, so long as you hold up yours and kill Koyuki Kazuhana. I can't stand having that woman doing what should be a man's job, and to make matters worse she's filming that movie. Yeah whatever, Onato replied, I already told you I'd get it done after I kill the Namikaze brat. Though I hear she is quite beautiful so I think have a little fun with her first. Finally his chance for revenge had come. 4 months later. Naruto and Koyuki were resting against a tree in the backyard of the palace after finishing up one of the scenes for the movie, and were now taking a break. Naruto closed his eyes and leaned back as he pulled Koyuki in between his legs, said woman letting out a content sigh with a small smile on her face as she too closed her eyes to get some rest. It had been 4 months since he had come here and agreed to be in his sensei's perverted movie. He had a newfound respect for Koyuki's ability as an actress. He had never realized not only how hard it was to memorize lines but also how embarrassing it was. Naruto could not even count the number of times he had felt his face turn so red it looked like it was about to burst. Of course it could have something to do with the fact that the movie he was doing was porn and almost all of the lines were of a perverted and sleazy nature. It had taken Naruto about 2 months just to get over his embarrassment at some of the lines he had to say. He had also made sure to go out on a few more dates with Koyuki, often taking her for dinner and walks around some of the parks she had made around the palace. Doing so had allowed them to get to know things about each other that they had not known before, like Koyuki had a fear of snow rabbits after one had bitten her when she was a child. Of course Naruto had laughed at that, before Koyuki gave him that glare that all women seemed to possess making the young man pale. He never knew an actress could be so petrifying. To compensate he had told her of something he was afraid of, it was not known to anyone. Except Iruka but Naruto had a deathly fear of men with ridiculously long tongues. Of course only one man he knew of had a long tongue like that, Ever since his encounter with Orochimaru in the Forest of Death where the Snake Man had wrapped his tongue around Naruto's neck, he had gotten nightmares about it, especially after hearing of the man's fetish for little boys. Koyuki had not only found that funny but had made it a point to lick him as a greeting every morning afterwards, though it had the exact opposite effect that Orochimaru's tongue had given. Of course this had caused problems of another sort. Jiraiya had caught her straddling Naruto trying to lick the boy's face and began making several comments on how proud he was of Naruto. He not only got a Rasengan for his troubles but Koyuki had several of her samurai take him outside and hang him on a flag pole by his underwear. Of course Naruto had not slacked off in his training either. The blonde had met with each of the summons and gotten to know their abilities and weaknesses. He found out that some of them would not work as well with his fighting style but had gotten to know them anyway in the interest of keeping a good relation with the toads. Jiraiya had also taken to teaching him the toad techniques. Jiraiya had learned those being the Kuchiyos, Gamaguchi Shibari, which summoned the nearly indestructible esophagus of a great fire-breathing toad and allowed it to cover an entire area. The Gamadera Kage Ayashuri no Jutsu, toad flat shadow manipulation technique, allowing Naruto to become one with an enemy's shadow while at the same time paralyzing them, allowing the blonde to use them as a human shield. The last one he had learned so far was the Gamagakure no Jutsu, hiding in a toad technique, where Naruto would hide in the stomach of a special diving toad from Mount Myoboku. While Naruto had yet to learn all the other ones yet, but the ones he did know he had become proficient enough in them that Jiraiya and the toads were impressed. Naruto. Naruto looked down at Koyuki who still had her eyes closed. What will you do once you become Hokage? She asked. What do you mean? Naruto tilted his head to the side as if trying to understand the question. Koyuki giggled at the cute and confused look Naruto had on his face. I mean, what will you do after becoming Hokage? I've always wondered what you plan to do after you've accomplished that goal. Naruto looked at her for a moment as his eyes glazed over. Flashback. Naruto rubbed his eyes with his arms, getting the tears out before he looked at Jiraiya with a smile. I guess I'll have to fix that when I become Hokage, nay. Jiraiya chuckled as he ruffled Naruto's hair. I guess so, but you won't become Hokage by moping about like this. True peace? Naruto asked in curiosity as he looked at his teacher. Jiraiya nodded. I believe the time will come when we eventually understand each other. The white-haired man laughed, though I don't know how to do that yet. He looked over at Naruto. If I can't find a way, then you'll do it for me. Naruto grinned. You bet, Ero-sensei. Flashback end. Naruto. Naruto blinked as he looked down at Koyuki. I'm sorry Koyuhime, what were you saying? Koyuki gave him worried glance for a second before giving him an exasperated look, though she still had a smile on her face. I was asking what you wanted to do after becoming Hokage. Ah. Right. Naruto chuckled as a sheepish grin spread across his face. Well, there are a lot of things I want to do. Koyuki waited for a moment to see if Naruto would tell her. After a few moments of waiting with no answer forthcoming, she got exasperated. Well? She asked. Well, I could tell you, but where would the fun in that be if you didn't figure it out on your own? Naruto said with a small twinkle in his eyes. Koyuki gave him a scowl for a second before the two began to laugh. Laying her head back down, she closed her eyes and snuggled into Naruto's chest. Letting his warm presence engulf her as she listened to his heartbeat. Hey Naruto, she asked, getting his attention. Do you have any names for when we have children? Naruto made several choking noises as he felt his face burn up. What? Come here Akiko-chan, Takane said in a lustful voice as he moved towards Akiko, making grabbing motions with his hands. Akiko backed up against the wall as she tried to resist. No, we can't. Ah. She was cut off as Takane grabbed her luscious breasts with his hands and began to knead them. Leaning down, Takane began nibble, kiss, lick and bite Akiko along her neck. Leaving several love bites as Akiko's struggling began to weaken. Eventually the busty young woman felt her resistance to Takan's advances disappear as she wrapped her arms around his neck and began grinding her sex along the ever-enlarging tent in his pants. Takane slipped one of his hands inside her shirt and bra as he caressed and groped the woman's enticing and pert tits, loving the feel of her soft and supple skin in his hands as he played with the hardened nipple. Ah. Takane. Akiko gasped as she tried to form coherent thoughts and sentences. Take me. Ah. Take me now. Please. I thought you'd never ask Akiko-chan, Takane whispered in a husky voice as he began to nibble on her earlobe. End cut. The lights turned on revealing the people who were here, cameramen who began to take stop filming, the director who began to go on about how well the two acted and Jiraiya who was giggling perversely. Takane and Akiko both took off the wigs they had been wearing, revealing them to be Naruto and Koyuki as the two walked off the set. So how did we do? Naruto asked, having finally become desensitized to the acting he was required to do. You two did excellent, the director said with tears in his eyes, just what I would expect from two amazing actors as yourself. This movie will no doubt be a hit that rivals even my Princess Gale movies. Naruto's sweat dropped as he watched the director burst into tears over a movie. Shaking his head, he looked at Koyuki with a smile. I guess that's a wrap then. The two chuckled at his corny joke before he continued. So I'll see you tonight. Of course, Koyuki said with a sultry smile. Don't be late, Naruto-kun. Naruto grinned as he kissed Koyuki on the cheek and grabbed Jiraiya by the hair, pulling him along as said man went from complimenting his student to complaining about rude apprentices picking on their senseis. Koyuki smiled as she watched them go, before moving into her dressing room so she could get the movie makeup off. She looked herself over in the mirror as she finished scrubbing the last vestige of makeup off herself. Smiling, she was just about to change into some normal clothes when a knock came at her door. Come in, she called out absently as she turned around to see Naruto coming in her room. Oh Naruto-kun, did you forget something, or was it that you couldn't stand to be away from me? Koyuki asked with a grin. Naruto grinned as he walked up, causing Koyuki to frown at how wrong it looked. Actually, it was neither. The young daimyo had no time to react as a cloth was smothered over her nose. Koyuki's eyes widened as she tried to struggle. Unfortunately, whoever this imposter was far stronger than her and she felt her eyes flutter closed and eventually everything went black. Naruto grunted as he skidded back from the powerful slash. As soon as his backwards momentum ceased, Naruto launched himself at his opponent again. A toad with two curved swords known as Gamataken, because Naruto had no set sword style, he was having the toads who could use bladed weapons help him. They had agreed to teach them their style of fighting, letting Naruto get accustomed to various toad sword katas. Naruto found that this was something he enjoyed the most when working with the toads and had created several kenjutsu moves that he and the toads he worked with used in conjunction. After blocking several more slashes and stabs, Naruto and Gamataken jumped apart, bowing to each other. Excellent job, young one, Gamataken said in a voice that was very similar to a samurai speaking to his apprentice. You are learning well. Thank you, Gamataken-sensei, Naruto said as he unsealed a bottle from his wrist and took a long drink. He looked over at the sky and realized that it was getting late. Looking over at the sword-fighting toad, he bowed again. I must be getting back soon. It was nice studying with you as always. Gamataken nodded before bowing and returning to the summon world. Oi, Aro-sensei, Naruto called out to Jiraiya, who was over at the small river, no doubt looking at the women who were playing there. Grinning, Naruto used the Oroki no Jutsu to transform into Naruko, a female version of Naruto with long blonde hair done up in twin ponytails and a figure that could rival Tsunade. Walking behind Jiraiya, Naruko put her hands over the white-haired pervert's eyes and pressed her ample bosom into his back. Jiraiya-sama, why watch those girls when you can study me? Naruko said in a sultry and seductive voice that sent chills down Jiraiya's spine. I knew you would come out to play sooner or later, you little minx, Jiraiya said with a perverted grin and a large nosebleed as he turned around. Only to be disappointed as Naruto dispelled the transformation. Come on, perv, Naruto said as he hooked a thumb over his shoulders pointing towards the palace. Time to go back. Turning around, Naruto started walking. Jiraiya caught up a moment later, grumbling about disrespectful gakis not letting an old man get his looks in. Naruto frowned as another of the maids told Naruto that she had not seen Koyuki anywhere. It was not like her to be late for one of their dates. Deciding to question the person who was the most likely to see Koyuki last, the blonde made his way towards the director's office. When he got there, Naruto knocked on the door. He waited for several minutes and after receiving no answer, he frowned before opening it. The entire office was empty with no trace of the man having even been in it yet. Frowning, Naruto made his way to the set. When he got there, Naruto's eyes widened. Everyone was currently lying on the ground unconscious. Moving over to the director who was slumped in his chair, Naruto unrolled a scroll and unsealed several medical contents and a chemistry set. He took a small blood sample from the man and put it in a dropper, dropping it in a beaker with several chemicals in it. He stirred the contents until it was a light purple and then took out a special piece of paper containing a seal on the inside and unrolled it. The seal was another one of Naruto's inventions and was made to give him a diagnostic of any foreign substances in a person's body, using a sample of someone's blood and mixing it with chakra-conductive ink that was normally used for sealing. Naruto had been able to use this as a replacement for the diagnostics jutsu that Tsunade and other medics were capable of performing. Placing the blood on it, he watched as the symbols for the seal began to move towards the blood sample. The ink coalesced into the center and started forming words listing off the different compounds that were found in the man. One of which Naruto recognized as chloroform and another is a form of nerve gas. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto made his way to Koyuki's room. Smashing through the door, the Naruto looked around the room and saw the small area near the mirror desk combo where Koyuki did her makeup was a bit of a mess with the chair knocked over and several makeup kits scattered around it. Walking over to it, he channeled a small amount of Kyuubi's chakra into his nose. There were minute traces of chloroform in the air here as well. Naruto's mind began to deduce what happened as he realized someone must have infiltrated the palace, snuck in chloroforming Koyuki either sometime before or after letting a bomb of knockout gas in the set room. The blonde frowned, knowing that sneaking into the palace would be a nearly impossible task, even for someone of Jiraiya or his caliber, meaning there's a traitor either living in the palace or Koyuki's court. Making several hand seals, Naruto slammed his hands into the ground and summoned a small messenger toad. I want you to go to Jiraiya and tell him that someone has kidnapped Koyuki. Let him know that there is a traitor either within the palace or on the Haru no Kuni council and ask him to find out who it is, Naruto ordered without preamble. The toad, realizing this was important, nodded and went to find the toad Sennin. Naruto used his enhanced senses again to see if there was anything that would help determine who the attacker was. There is a faint trace of earth. This left several possibilities, but one of them stood out to Naruto the most. Crouching down similar to a bloodhound, Naruto began to sniff out the source of the smell. Koyuki woke up with a groan. She opened her eyes blearily, trying to get the faint blurriness out of her vision. Blinking a few times as she looked around, finding herself in what looked like one of the abandoned factories where Dodo had built his war machines. She tried to move a hand to her face but soon found them to be bound. Her eyes widened as she tried to get out, only to find that she was having no such luck. Looking at herself, she found that she was tied to a chair that was bolted to the floor. Her ankles were bound to it and her hands were tied around the back. She tried to wiggle her arms and loosen her bindings so she could get free. That won't work. Koyuki's eyes widened as she looked up to see a man with scraggly black hair and green eyes grinning at her. That ninja wire is strong enough to hold even the most powerful shinobi. A little spoiled princess like you will have no luck escaping those. Koyuki glared at the man, knowing that he was the one who most likely kidnapped her. Who are you? What do you want with me? Onato paused as he seemed to think about answering before he shrugged. I suppose it doesn't matter if I tell you. It's not like you're gonna live long anyway. You're just a means to an end for me. I'm simply using you to get to the person I want to kill. The person you want to kill? Koyuki questioned as she studied the man. He was definitely a shinobi, that much was clear. Except he didn't show any hide, meaning he was either a missing ninja or was trying not to implicate his country. And who is it you want to kill? She asked, determined to get as much information as possible. Onato gave her a grin that sent chills down her spine. Why, I'm gonna kill your boyfriend, of course. Naruto. Koyuki breathed as her eyes widened. That's right. Onato laughed. I'm finally gonna get my revenge by killing the son of that man. Then I'm gonna kill you. He walked up to her and Koyuki began to fight with her bindings even more. It's a shame I gotta kill you though, you're quite the specimen. He trailed a finger along her jaw but was forced to pull it back when Koyuki tried to bite it. Haha. And feisty too. It seems. Perhaps after this is over I'll have some fun before I kill you. Koyuki shuddered at the tone in the man's voice. It was a tone that had insanity mixed in with lust. Obviously this man had lost his mind a long time ago. Onato. Koyuki turned her head to see a man running towards them. He's here. Good. Very good, Onato said with a smile. Why don't you and the others go and welcome our guest? The man left and Onato turned to Koyuki with a rag. Realizing what it was, the female daimyo began to struggle. The black-haired man merely laughed as he put the rag over her face, watching as Koyuki's eyes rolled into the back of her head. Naruto looked at the large building that the scent had led him to. The place was up in one of the more mountainous regions of Haru no Kuni. The building itself was a very industrialized factory with several smokestacks and what looked like a large furnace or smelting factory. The blonde Namikaze heir knew what it was. Back when Dodo had been the daimyo, he had several of these places made. They were large factories that turned out numerous types of weapons and vehicles. It was here that the chakra armor, kunai launchers and blimps were built. Naruto knew that Koyuki still had a few of them going to help build up Haru's defenses, but this one was obviously abandoned for some reason or another. Likely Koyuki had not even known about it, meaning this one had made something that Dodo wanted kept secret. Pausing at the entrance, Naruto looked up. Chances were high they were expecting him to either use the main or back entrances or one of the windows on the upper levels. It was likely they would have several traps waiting for him at those locations. That meant that the most efficient way to get inside would be to enter somewhere they would not expect him to. Moving around the side, Naruto stopped when he estimated that he was halfway between the front and back entrances. Getting out a brush, Naruto began to write on the wall. The seal he was using was called an intangibility seal, and like the name suggests, it allowed a solid object to become intangible, allowing people and other objects to pass through it unhindered. This was done by having the seal affect the atomic particles that all matter was created from and making them become loose from each other. When that happened, one could pass through a solid object as if it was water. Jiraiya had told him it was one of his more ingenious seals and would be a boon for infiltration and espionage missions. Once he finished writing, Naruto channeled some chakra into the seal to activate them. Placing his hands on the wall, the blonde watched as a ripple went through the wall, stopping where Naruto had placed absorption and dispersion seal to make sure that the intangibility effect was confined to a certain area. Once Naruto's hands sunk into the wall, he began to walk through, feeling the particles move out of the way of his mass. When he was all the way through, Naruto activated his invisibility jutsu and started to search the area, making sure that he created a map within his mind. The place he was in was definitely a factory of some kind. Several assembly lines were set up in a linear path inside the room. Looking at it, Naruto saw what looked like molds for the chakra armor Naruto saw Dodo wearing, making Naruto suspicious that this had been the place Dodo's completed version of chakra armor came from. Refocusing his thoughts, Naruto crept through the room and made it into a hallway. Deciding to head left, Naruto walked silently along the wall. He channeled chakra into his ears, hoping that he could make out some kind of sound. While he could not hear anything, he eventually found himself reaching the end of the hall. At the end there was a large set of steel doors that were partially opened. If Naruto's internal map was correct, this was somewhere near where the back entrance was located. Making a cage bushin, Naruto had it open the door in case of traps. When none were forthcoming, the clone dispelled and Naruto walked in. The first thing he noticed was that the room was large. It looked like some kind of practice range for jutsu or weapons. There was an area with targets made to look like people. Most of them were destroyed or had rusted and broken from disuse. On the opposite side were several lockers that Naruto was now positive stored weapons and that chakra armor. This place was most likely where they did testing on the products they built here. The second thing that Naruto noticed was that Koyuki was here. She was bound together on the wall opposite from him. Her legs were wrapped together and the sleeves of her arms were pinned to the wall with kunai, making her look like she was on a crucifix. Naruto narrowed his eyes when he recognized the ninja wire as .8 grade composite silk steel, a type that Iwagakure had been known to use during the Third Great Ninja War. He started running towards her only for his ninja instincts to kick in at the last second, rolling to the left as several kunai and shuriken came at him. Finishing his roll, he moved onto his feet and realized he was surrounded. Taking a millisecond, he analyzed his opponents. There were 6 of them. Most looked rather plain, wearing standard ninja clothing with no identification marks, nor did they have on hide-ates. However, Naruto knew this could mean anything. He immediately disclosed the idea that this was a ninja mercenary unit. Aside from the fact that there were very few ninja mercenaries, the only units he knew actually existed were Akatsuki, who was considered a mercenary group right now. The fact that this was also an apparent trap for him rather than Koyuki added to that fact, since while it could be a unit sent by one of his enemies, it was also not likely. His only enemies were Akatsuki and Iwa. Akatsuki would never hand off the capturing of Jinchuriki to others, and Iwa would rather kill him themselves. Naruto looked at the smirking man in front of him as he began running a mental checklist of all the people he knew or recognized from somewhere. Eventually Naruto hit pay dirt. Onato Kazuchi, a rank ninja of Iwagakure also known as Iron Fist Onato, specializes in using the stone and iron particles in the earth and combining them with your arms to give your arms a powerful super strength, similar to that of Tsunade of the Sennin. Onato's smirk widened. Just what I would expect from the son of that man. But your knowledge won't save you here. If you give up, I may let your girlfriend spend some quality time with me before I kill her. Naruto snarled as he charged at the man, completely forgetting everything around him. The only thought running through his mind was that he was going to enjoy hanging this man up by his intestines. Instincts kicked in again, and it was only his hard-earned reflexes that saved him from being impaled by several earth spikes that shot up in front of Onato. Jumping into the air, the blonde shinobi flipped over the Iwa Jonin and threw several shuriken at him. Ninpu. Shuriken Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Ninja Art. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Without words or hand seals, the 5 shuriken became 50 as they head for the black-haired man. Onato's eyes widened for a moment before he jumped out of the way and pulled out a kunai to deflect what he was incapable of dodging. Naruto charged at him with 2 kunai in hand as he tried to impale the man through the skull. Before he could get to close, 2 of the ninja came in, one going with a high kick and the other hoping to take Naruto out at the knees. Ducking under the kick from the first ninja, Naruto placed his left hand on the ground as he pushed himself in the air just a centimeter above the foot swipe, grabbing the foot from the man who did the high kick as he spun. Using his impressive physical strength and momentum, lifted the man up by his ankle as he flipped, spinning the man around as he landed on the ground and slammed enemy ninja into the concrete surface with a loud crack, as small spider webs appeared underneath the man where the cement gave under the power of Naruto's assault. Rolling to the left, Naruto dodged an incoming kick. Twisting his body 180 degrees, the blonde came up on his feet and blocked a kunai strike to the neck. Channeling wind chakra into his kunai, Naruto sliced through the enemy's kunai, allowing Naruto to close the distance on the now wide-eyed ninja, smashing both palms into the man's solar plexus and sent him flying back, who crashed into and through the wall. Spinning on his heels, Naruto grabbed a kunai that was sent to impale him and threw it back towards his thrower with wind chakra added to it. The kunai went straight through the Iwa ninja's left lung as if it was mere air, causing the man to scream violently. Flipping himself backwards, Naruto was able to dodge an Iwa ninja who had attempted to impale him. Going through a few hand signs, Naruto's cheeks bulged as he smashed a hand on his stomach. Futen. Rinkuden. Wind release. Drilling air bullet. A large ball of compressed air shot from Naruto's mouth and smashed into the man's head. Not bothering to even look at the gore he created, Naruto landed on the ground. Doten. Doryu Taiga. Earth release. Earth flow river. Naruto cursed as he found himself slipping along the ground as a large river of mud smashed into him. Doten. Doryuso. Earth release. Earthen rising spears. Several spears shot out of the mud river and impaled Naruto in various vital areas, only for Naruto to disappear in a burst of smoke. The real Naruto appeared right behind the man who had done the jutsu with a spinning ball of chakra in his hand, smashing the Rasengan into the man's back, causing the man to scream as his flak jacket was ripped to shreds along with the flesh and muscles located in his back. Taking several deep breaths, Naruto stood up and looked around. 5 of the 6 ninja who had attacked him were either dead or unconscious. However, Onato was missing. Looking over to where Koyuki was, Naruto narrowed his eyes at seeing her gone too. Seeing the door on the other side partially opened, Naruto charged through it and outside as he followed the scent that he recognized as Koyuki. Damn that boy. Onato cursed as he carried a still unconscious Koyuki over his shoulder. He had been so sure that they would be able to kill that blasted Namikaze if they caught him off guard. Perhaps he should have tried to take Jonin with him instead of Chunin. Maybe then he would have had a better shot, but he had been impatient. Well, doesn't matter, I'll get him next time. He looked at the young woman over his shoulder and smirked, and I still got her. I think I will have a little fun with her before I kill her, then I'll tell that blasted Onato. Turning his head, Onato cursed as he saw Naruto running straight for him and gaining fast, channeling as much chakra as he was able to. He increased his speed. Seeing this, Naruto threw off his cloak and increased his own speed, leaving the cloak behind to smash into the ground and create a large crater. Naruto found himself swiftly closing in on the man he was going to beat into a coma, But Onoto still seemed to have a few tricks up his sleeve as he threw several makebishi, nails used to distract an opponent, on the ground behind him. This forced Naruto to jump in the air, slowing his forward momentum and allowing Onoto to gain some distance. When Naruto finally caught up to the Iwa Jonin to see the man standing at the edge of a cliff face, Onoto spun around and smirked as he looked at Naruto. I may not be able to kill you right now, Onoto said as his smirk turned into a large grin that seemed to scream insanity. But I'm at least gonna make sure that I hurt in some way. Naruto's eyes widened as Onoto threw Koyuki off the cliff. Now it's your turn to feel the pain of losing someone you love. Haha oof. The man's laughing rant was cut off as Naruto smashed his fist in the man's gut with enough force to send him flying off the cliff as well. Not wasting a moment, Naruto threw himself headfirst over the ledge, channeling wind chakra in front of him to cut through the air to decrease the wind resistance around him and allow him to speed up. Naruto caught up with Koyuki and wrapped an arm around her waist before flashing to Onoto, who he had placed a Hiraishin seal on when he hit him. Creating a cage bushin to grab Onoto, Naruto threw a kunai high into the air. Both Narutos flashed to it and Naruto re-threw the kunai so it was back to where he had jumped. Flashing one more time, the clone Naruto dropped Onoto and dispelled. Before the man could even think to get away, Naruto stomped his face into the ground with a foot, lifting it up several more times and brought it down, not stopping until there was a sizable indent in the shape of Onoto's face as the now unconscious man bled from his mouth, nose and ears. Sighing, Naruto looked at Koyuki, who was still completely out of it. Readjusting her so that her head was resting on his shoulder, Naruto created another clone to tie Onoto up and bring him with them. With luck, Jiraiya would be able to interrogate the man and find out if this was Iwa trying to kill him, or if the man had acted on his own. A fat and fairly short man with cropped brown hair and dark black eyes was running through the hall of his mansion as if the hounds of hell were after him. This could be likened to the truth, only instead of hounds it was a group of samurai. The man eventually made it to his office and barred the doors shut, pushing his desk and several other large objects in the way in an attempt to hold them so he could use his secret escape route. Moving over to his fireplace, he twisted one of the statues on it and watched with an impatient air as the fireplace began to rotate. Only to see a tall man with spiky white hair. The fat man turned around to try and get away, only to feel a sharp pain in the back of his neck just as the samurai burst through the door. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Jiraiya walked down the hall towards the room he knew his apprentice most likely was. As he did, he gave a few whistles and cat calls to some of the maids he passed, much to their disdain. Reaching the room, the white-haired Sennin knocked on the door. Come in. Opening the door, Jiraiya found his prized pupil sitting on the bed, with Koyuki's head in his lap as he gently ran his hands through the young woman's hair. It had been a few days since the fiasco where Koyuki had been kidnapped and used as bait to get to Naruto. Since then, his blonde apprentice had refused to let the daimyo out of his sight and had even gone so far as to threaten anyone except for a few people that Koyuki seemed to trust when they came near her. Resisting the urge to tease his apprentice, Jiraiya got the young man's attention. I got the information you wanted. Which bit? Asked Naruto as Koyuki turned on her side to look at the white-haired man. Both, Jiraiya said with a smirk as he tossed the blonde a scroll while Koyuki sat up and put her head on his shoulder. Jiraiya bit his lip so as not to let out a perverted giggle, knowing what kind of pain it would bring as he continued. It seems that the one who allowed them to infiltrate the palace was a council member by the name of Kawasai Fuheiki. He had apparently made a deal with Onoto to allow him entrance so long as he killed you, Koyuki Dono. Koyuki frowned. I am not surprised by that. When Dodo had his coup d'état, Kawasai had literally vanished. At the time, many of us thought he had been killed off, but when he returned some time after the war claiming to have been imprisoned and escaped, many became suspicious of him. Though no one could ever prove anything, and he had at least outwardly shown support for myself and my father. Jiraiya nodded. It seems that he had been hiding out in an isolated region of Haru no Kuni to the northeast and returned when he had heard of Dodo's defeat. My guess is he was waiting for an opportunity to kill you and take over himself. The movie combined with the Iwa ninja who had come to kill Naruto presented him the perfect opportunity. Thankfully, he won't be a bother since the man was arrested by your forces just a few hours ago. Koyuki nodded as Naruto asked his next question. What about Onoto? Was this a planned assassination or the result of a man driven by revenge? Apparently it was revenge, Jiraiya said as he crossed his arms. I was able to find out that he had been told specifically not to go after you by the Tsuchikage. It seemed that with the old man ordering him not to kill you he became unhinged, I guess would be the best way to put it. He managed to forge mission documents and handed them to several Chunin. They were so eager to kill the son of the Yondaime I doubt they even noticed they were fake. Naruto nodded. Very well, I will send a message to Iwa letting them know to keep a better leash on their ninja and to make sure they give some form of reparations to me and Koyuheim for not making a war over this little incident. Jiraiya smiled at his apprentice's decision. It was both wise and a good tactical move as far as politics went and would put the Sandaime Tsuchikage in his pocket since the old man would be smart enough to realize that it was only because of Naruto that his village would not be destroyed. This assassination fiasco should also keep their ninja in check, since they just officially not only failed but would have to be weary of Konoha finding out. Clapping his hands together, Jiraiya smirked at the two of them. Now that all of this boring stuff is out of the way, I've come to tell you that we will be filming again. Naruto sighed. Somehow I knew you would bring that up. He looked over at Koyuki who shrugged. I suppose it can't be helped. Of course we've got to finish this movie. Jiraiya shouted as he pumped his fist in the air, causing Naruto to groan. Lenoki looked out of the window in his office as he stared at the buildings below, his current mind going through the conversation he had with Onato a few months ago. He had not seen the man again afterwards and was beginning to get worried. It was well known that his hatred for the Kuroi Senkuren far deeper than anyone else's. That he had not shown up for a mission or anything like he usually did in the past few months was worrying. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he ordered. The door opened and in walked one of his messenger ninja who had a scroll in his hands, so this scroll came from Haru no Kuni. Lenoki frowned as he took the scroll. Iwa had not had any form of relation since they stopped exporting coal from them decades ago. What could possibly be their reason for sending them a message? You may go, Lenoki ordered the messenger who bowed and left. The old Tsuchikage unrolled the scroll and began to read the contents, his eyes widening with each sentence. Dear Sandaime Tsuchikage Dono, I regret to inform you that as of several days ago your ninja Onato along with 5 Chunin-level shinobi were killed after an attempted assassination on my persons. Because of this I will be requesting 1 million yen both to my account as well as another 1 million to the account of Koyuki Kazuhana for Onato's kidnapping and attempted murder of the Haru no Kuni daimyo. If you do not comply with this demand I will be forced to let out the information that you attempted to murder not just a shinobi of Konoha but also a daimyo. However, should you do this I am willing to overlook what has happened here so long as you never attempt something similar and learn to keep your shinobi on a better leash. From Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Lenoki sat back in his chair as he felt his shoulders slump. This was a complete disaster. Not only would he have to pay all of that money in order to keep this from getting out and destroying his village by starting a war, but he also had to let the families of those men know that because of a man's lust for revenge these people died. The only saving grace, which really was not a saving grace, was that the person who was attacked would forget and drop all charges so long as he was able to hold up his end of the bargain. He closed his eyes as he pinched the bridge of his large nose. Getting out several sheets of paper he began to write letters for the families of the deceased. XXXXXXXXXXXXX Omake. Jiraiya and the director continued to stare at the room where Naruto and Koyuki were supposed to be filming in. They had yet to hear even a peep from the room and both were wondering what was going on. It's been nearly 8 hours, the director said. What do you think they're doing in there? Hell if I know, Jiraiya said with a frown as he walked up to the door and knocked. Oi. Gaki, are you and Koyuki Dono going to get started or what? When he received no response, Jiraiya tried to open the door only to find it locked. Unsure what to do, Jiraiya decided that it would be best if he did not try to break the door down and incur the wrath of his apprentice. He walked over back to the director. Let's just leave them in there for now, we'll come back later and see if anything's happened yet. 4 days later Naruto and Koyuki had still not come out of the room and the two were getting worried. Jiraiya was just about to go up and break down the door. Just then the door opened and out walked Naruto and Koyuki. Naruto was sporting a rather large smile while Koyuki had frazzled hair, a noticeable limp and that odd after-sex glow that all women seem to get after hot passionate sex. Jiraiya paused in his walk as he gave Naruto a lecherous grin. I was beginning to wonder when you would get out. I guess you two were just having too much fun, so did you do the scenes correctly? Naruto tilted his head to the side and frowned. Scenes. You know the scenes for the movie? Jiraiya asked. Naruto looked over at Koyuki, who gave him a shrug. Sorry, I guess we forgot that we were even making a movie. Jiraiya looked at the two before he fell over anime style. Naruto grinned as he picked up Koyuki bridal style. So what say we go take a shower and order some room service? When the two left, Jiraiya got up and groaned as he rubbed his face. Stupid Gaki can't even remember he's making a movie. He had better done some amazing stuff in there, or I'm never gonna have him film in one of my movies again. Later that day, both Jiraiya and the director were found dead. The doctors who did the autopsy deduced that it was caused by massive bleeding of the sinuses. When they tried to figure out why they were given a tape which had been found in the VCR the two were next to, when the doctors played it, they too were killed by massive nosebleeds. The video was of Koyuki and Naruto having sex for 4 straight days. Several days later, the movie was found by someone else who decided to put it on the market. Many males ended up buying the movie only for all of them to die as well, thus became what was known as the Great Ika Ika Massacre.